I have always been here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, geeks and nerds and ambassadors everywhere, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing. And hope y'all are having a great Sunday night. Hope y'all have had a great day. And for those of you that didn't catch my stream earlier today, this is part 2 of my double header this Sunday, the 16th of January 2020. And I'm back with a brand new ambassadorial editorial. And tonight, going to be talking about a topic that's very near and dear to yours truly, the ambassador, Marvel, of course. And tonight we're going to be discussing Marvel before the MCU. And tonight we're going to be doing a breakdown of all of the movies, all the animated series, and so on that came out in the years before the MCU started back in 2008. And just sharing our favorite films, sharing our favorite series, and so on, and talk about what this might mean for the future of the MCU. And, well, considering everything that's been going on the last several years with Marvel, the future for Marvel is looking very bright. And speaking as a longtime hardcore Marvel fan, I am very happy. And tonight, we're gonna get in the Wayback Machine when we're going to travel back to the 80s, into the 90s, into the early 2000s, and discuss this thing called Marvel. I have, as always, dropped the link in the chat for anybody that wants to join the stream tonight and join the discussion. So if you want to talk Marvel before the MCU with me, the link is there. By all means, use it. And as always, if this is your first visit to the Ambassadorial Wing, thank you for being here tonight. I hope you enjoy your time here. I hope you enjoy the discussion. I hope you find what I have to say of interest and entertaining, as always. And make sure you do smash that like button. Share this out with all of your comic book movie fans, superhero fans, and everything else across the board. And I do want to send a shout out to the chat to everyone that is either lurking or was in the chat before I went live just as well a few minutes ago. And Ace Mowick and Guard Guts Entertainment, gentlemen, good evening. And I hope y'all are having a marvelous Sunday evening, pun intended. And also, George, it is good to see you, man. Thank you for popping in. So, but we don't stand on a whole bunch of ceremony here on the Ambassadorial Wing. I don't give you like a 15-minute intro. I do my thing, and then we jump straight into the topic of the evening. So, let's begin. Marvel before the MCU. Now, of course, for those of you who know me, who have known me for a very long time, who follow me on social media, who have talked with me on social media, whether that's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, you know how much I love Marvel. And to kind of give you all some context, for those of you that may not have been, well, to put it plainly, but not rudely, alive before the MCU was a thing, Marvel did exist before the MCU. And obviously, it all started with the comics. And we really didn't have a steady stream of Marvel content before the 2000s. It was kind of sporadic. And also, as well, the quality of the content that we got from Marvel was somewhat sporadic. Some of it was really, really stellar, and some of it not so much. So, to kind of give you all a little taste of what I grew up with in terms of Marvel content, outside of the comic books, of course, we have to kind of go back to one of the granddaddies, or maybe perhaps what would be regarded as the granddaddy of cinematic Marvel before the MCU. And that is, of course, a quirky, very oddball, very strange little film called Howard the Duck. And yes, I do recall very vividly watching Howard the Duck as a young kid and as a teenager on VHS and on TV, because they would run it as a afternoon or evening movie on some of the networks that I watched growing up. And yes, I found Howard the Duck just as bizarre then as I do now. But this was Marvel's first attempt to put one of their lesser known characters on the big screen. And to say it failed is an understatement. Not to mention, this was one of the few times when there was a project. Yes, Ace, I was actually about to mention that exact fact. Howard the Duck was in fact produced by one of the great icons of cinema, a man who needs no introduction, George Lucas. And real quick, very quickly to the chat, Mr. Leroy Kong. Good evening, sir. It is good to see you. Thank you for popping in. Appreciate it as always. So, and I will bring up George's comment here real quick. I finally saw Howard the Duck 10 years ago on Peacock and found it weird and bizarre. I think it was the one Marvel film George Lucas was involved in, but not sure. Yes, George, you are correct, sir. This movie, Howard the Duck, is, to say it was out there is an understatement. And to say that some of the things that take place in this movie are very bizarre, because we do deal with a, I'll try and put this politely and hopefully not get myself in trouble, a very unconventional love story, if you all get my drift. I mean, you have a very lovely and talented and attractive Leah Thompson in this movie. And there is a, again, I'm trying to say this where I don't get myself in trouble, but there's a very unconventional love story in Howard the Duck. And it is just absolutely one of the weirdest movies that I think George Lucas ever slapped his name on. And that's saying something. So, and to the chat, also, Ferris of Ferris World Geek World, it is good to see you, man. Has says, "Hey, Ambassador, I never got to ask you this. Did you ever watch the Incredible Hulk live action show from the late 70s and its movies?" I watched a few of them, Ferris, but I didn't watch it all that much. It just wasn't my thing. To be honest with you, it's not that I disliked the Incredible Hulk TV show with Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby, but like I said, it just was not my thing. So, and that was actually one of the very early attempts to put a Marvel show, and I'll say this, a Marvel TV show together. And it was relatively successful from what I understand. Now, again, like I said, I didn't grow up watching this. I saw it maybe in passing, but it was not something that I watched on a regular basis. And a shout out to the chat also for Fook Norris and Benson's gentlemen. Good to see you again as always. And yes, Mr. Leroy Kong, rest in peace to Bill Bixby. Yeah. And Benson's, I will be candid with you. I have never ever heard of Condor Man. I am not going to lie to you all. I am not going to try and deceive you or try and play this up like I know every single thing that came out that was Marvel related before I was born. I don't. I know what I know, and that's what I know. So I I can't say that I ever even heard of Condor Man before you mentioned it to me a few weeks ago, Benson. So I'm I'm kind of at a loss on that one. But what I do know is the movies. And like I mentioned, you have a very unconventional start cinematically for Marvel films in terms of Howard the Duck. But you do have a very interesting cast in Howard the Duck. Like I mentioned, you have um, Leah Thompson. You have what was his name? Tim Robbins. You also have what was his name? What was his name? Jeffrey what? Oh crap! He plays one of the professors that gets possessed by one of the aliens. Dang nabbit! He played one of the townspeople in Sleepy Hollow. He was the Reverend. He was also the dad in Beetlejuice. It'll come to me when I don't need to think of it. And also to the chat, PLK Entertainment. Good afternoon, my friend. Good to see you. Or well, technically, it might be afternoon where you're at, but good evening rather. Says, hey, Ambassador, how are you? Okay, in terms of Marvel pre-MCU, the first two Blades and Spider-Man films, yeah, honestly, and yeah, PLK, I'm doing good. Thank you for popping in, bud. But yeah, and what I will get, I kind of want to go in a little bit of a chronological order in terms of, yeah, Ace, the principal in Ferris. I cannot for the life of me think of his name off the top of my head right now. Let's see. So, and also bring up Ferris. I'll bring up your comment, Ambassador. Were you aware that Thomas Jane wasn't the first live action Punisher, but in fact, it was none other than Ivan Drago himself, Dolph Lundgren, because I wasn't aware of it at the time. Yeah, Ferris, I actually knew of the Punisher film with Dolph Lundgren. I've heard some people say it is actually a pretty good film. I've actually never watched it. But I will say, for me at least, Thomas Jane is my Punisher. Now I know John Bernthal has done he did a very good job with the Netflix Punisher series, and I won't lie, I've been very keen to check out that series at some point. Maybe in a couple months or so, I'll reactivate our Netflix subscription and give that a watch because I would love to see that. I won't lie. But honestly, I really, considering the Punisher is not a all-time favorite character of mine, I was really intrigued by the movie with Thomas Jane. I honestly thought Thomas Jane did a really good job playing Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. I thought that movie had a great cast. I mean, obviously, you had Thomas Jane, you had John Travolta, you had Roy Scheider, and I mean, just to name a few of the bigger names in that film. But the other interesting thing about the Punisher, the Thomas Jane Punisher film, was the fact that it did borrow from a little bit of Ultimate Punisher in terms of um the Russian, that whole fight scene in that movie, and my gosh, that thing was um brutal as hell. And the fact that Thomas Jane, that particular Punisher, did chop the Russian's head off. And also a shout out to the chat, Darius McManus. Darius, is good to see you, bud. It's been a little bit. Appreciate you popping by. So, and I'll bring up your comment here, Ace. Doll's Punisher in the late 80s, fun action cheese, suits the comics from the time. Ray Stevens is the best Punisher post in his run. Ace, wasn't that the Punisher that was in the movie Punisher Warzone that they did after the Thomas Jane film? And yeah, Fook Norris, Dolph Lundgren, yeah, he also not only did he play the Punisher, he also played He-Man. Okay, Ace. Let's see, bring up your comment here. That was Marvel Knights Punisher, not Ultimate. Okay, yeah. All right, thanks, Ace. Appreciate that. So, hey, if any of you guys want to join me tonight for this discussion, the link is up in the chat, so don't be afraid of it. The link will not hurt you. The link will not bite. The link is your friend. So, And I'll bring up your comment here, PLK. I felt Ray Stevens looked the best as the Punisher. Um, maybe in terms of his look, sure, yeah. But the thing for me, PLK, and is I think Thomas Jane's performance better encapsulated the low key tone and some sort of the more driven aspect of the Punisher. So let's see. I'll bring up your comment here, Ace. And George, I do see you, but give me just a minute and I'll bring you in. So hang on. Yes, Warzone. The movie wasn't the best, but Stevens brought the character to life the best, I think. And that's fair. So that's fair, Ace. So anyway, want to give a very warm welcome to a longtime alum, a fellow ambassador. You know him, you love him. He is known as simply just George. George, good to see you, bud.
Good to see you too, Ambassador. And I know it's a little late, but Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well, bud. So, and real quick before you get started, greetings, Aaron of Aaron World Order. Good to see you, bud. And says Link does not talk, just Zelda, but I heard he bites in bed. Grief. Aaron,
that came out of nowhere.
Boy, didn't it? So, George, you're, you are my guest. I am your host. Where would you like to go with this discussion this evening? Marvel before the MCU. I know I brought up a few things, but the floor is yours.
Well, I will say Howard the Duck was definitely an interesting experience for me when I first watched it.
Interesting experience is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got okay. I'm just gonna say this. You have Leah Thompson prancing around in a little next to nothing and getting a little snuggly with a being of the avian variety. That to me is just a little bit off. and of course you cannot forget one very important scene at the very beginning of the movie, and I think it scarred many children for years into the future. Daisy's knockers.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and the interesting thing is, like, when I watched it for the first time, I remember I was rewatching Back to the Future, which also starred Leah Thompson. Mm-hmm. So it's like watching her go from there to there was just a very interesting experience.
Yeah, she goes from kissing her son, and she's like, it's like kissing my brother, to smooching with a being that has a beak.
Oh my goodness.
Good grief, Leah. What's wrong with you? I hope she, I honestly say this, and I don't mean to sound mean, but I hope she was able to have some semblance of a normal love life post Back to the Future, and definitely post Howard the Duck.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope that maybe she has just kind of repressed Howard the Duck from her memory. But I hope that if any fans ever brought a copy of the movie for her to sign, I hope she was like gracious and she was like, "Oh, okay, yes, I'll sign for you." I will admit, if I had ever had the opportunity to go like to a con or something like that, and she was there, I would definitely want to get my picture with her, because I love Back to the Future. It's one of my all-time favorite movie franchises, like ever. So, but anyway, George, I'm babbling. Go ahead, bud.
Yeah, I would say, like, are we bringing up any like TV shows like in this discussion, or just the movies?
Yeah. I know. I think it was Leroy or Ace or somebody mentioned the Hulk TV series. Now, as I said before, I don't know if you heard me say this. I never really watched the Hulk TV show or any of the TV movies. The character of the Hulk just wasn't particularly interesting to me. It's not that I hated the character of the Hulk. It just wasn't my thing. So, I mean, obviously, as a kid of the 90s, I grew up watching a lot of the animated series, like obviously X-Men and, of course, Spider-Man and well, not so much Fantastic Four, but definitely Silver Surfer and stuff like that. But as far as live action series went pre-MCU, No, not really.
Yeah, because I know for me, like my entry point was the animated series, and it's kind of similar to like how I felt about DC. The '90s, you had
Hmm.
like superhero animated series just in general being popular, and I think for
Yes.
a lot of people, particularly like people, maybe like older, like around my age, it was those like animated series from the '90s, early 2000s, and Spider-Man the animated series was my entry point for a lot of this stuff. Spider-Man was essentially my entry point for Marvel, and that's no surprise because he's such a big character. But just how well like that cartoon like played out, the story arcs, the voice acting,
Hmm.
and like looking back, like it feels like an animated soap opera at times, but I still love the hell out of it because it just gets a lot of things right about Spider-Man for me, and it got
Hmm.
me intrigued when you had those crossovers with Doctor Strange, Iron Man, the X-Men. It was like an entry point for those characters as well for me.
Well, yeah, and honestly, you're not George. You're not wrong because for a lot of us, particularly my generation, I mean, we grew up reading Marvel comics. We grew up reading about reading this series centered around these characters, and to see them be brought to the big screen, or well, rather to the small screen, was um, a real treat. And honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed. I still do enjoy those animated series even now. And a familiar face to the Ambassador Wing. You know him, you love him. He's quirky. Mr. Zach Leary, Howard the Duck was the first movie, I think. Yeah, Zach. If I'm remembering correctly, Howard the Duck was the first cinematic film of the Marvel universe back when before the MCU. But the really interesting thing is, I'll bring this up. We never really considered. I mean, I know they tried to do like the Punisher film, Captain America film, and so on, but we never really. I mean, as a kid of the '90s, we thought about, well, wouldn't it be cool if they did this movie with these characters, or a movie with this character, and so on, and we would like do our fan castings or anything as they're called nowadays. And I mean, obviously one of the things I talked about with my friends is X-Men because I love the X-Men franchise. It is by far one of my favorite franchises within the Marvel universe. And yes, I am very excited for when they are going to be bringing the X-Men into the MCU proper.
Absolutely.
And back in the day, we always talked about, well, who would be the best Professor Xavier? And of course, Star Trek The Next Generation being very popular. So, and hey, Zach, that's fine, bud. I know you probably got stuff you got to do and everything, but anytime you can spend here, you're always welcome. So, of course, Patrick Stewart was the person that everybody talked about. I mean, Patrick Stewart was very well known within geek circles, whether you were a fan of Star Trek or not. He looked the part. He sounded like Xavier from the animated series, or how we would figure Xavier would sound in a live action movie. And when we finally got the news that Bryan Singer was going to be putting together the cast for an X-Men film, that first one back in 99, that came out in 99, I should say. We were all elated beyond belief. Now, granted, they'd use a lot of unknown actors and actresses for that film. I mean, James Marsden, nobody really knew who he was. Now, obviously, Famke Jensen, she did have her role in James Bond, GoldenEye, and anything. But beyond that, she wasn't really a known actress. None of the actors who were in the first X-Men movies were known actors or actresses. I mean, they had done a few things, but when news that somebody was finally going to take a shot at doing an X-Men film, I absolutely went ballistic in the best possible way.
Yeah, I think like the first, especially the first two X-Men movies, like they get lost in the conversation when it comes to great comic book movies. It's like, okay, maybe like the first X-Men film like isn't perfect, but like X2 United, like I got a chance, like I rewatched the film like over the summer, and to me that film just gets better after every rewatch because one of the interesting aspects of that movie was when heroes and villains were working together.
Yeah, and well, honestly, speaking for myself, I thought the first film, it still stands out. It really stands as a benchmark for how good comic book films can be. And yeah, I'll agree with you. The second movie, especially, um, it deals with a lot of really interesting dynamics, particularly what we would quote or call the evil mutants or the more hostile mutants working alongside the more peaceable ones. And I will have to say, Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, great casting.
Very
I loved
very
Alan.
underrated performance. That was a
He-
very underrated performance that doesn't get talked enough about.
well, and the interesting thing is, I think what Alan Cumming brought to the character. I mean, obviously, he really did his research on the character, and uh, Kurt Wagner or Wagner, and everything, if you want to use the proper German accent for it, as Nightcrawler. He was a person of deep religious belief, and I liked the character design for Nightcrawler. I did like the angelic tattoos that he carved on himself and everything. And I will say that first sequence with him in the White House, or well, the fake White House, going after the president, that was a great, I mean, an absolutely great sequence. And it really set the stakes for what the movie was going to be about. And George, you're right, because those first two X-Men movies do get lost in the shuffle quite often because it was the first attempt to do an ensemble film with a superhero team. I mean, even the Fantastic Four films hadn't come out yet, and we'll get to those in due time. Most definitely. But what Singer was able to do, because here's the great thing about Singer. I know that he has his issues and everything, whether you believe they have credibility or not, or if they're credible or not, that's neither here nor there. I'm talking about solely his ability as a filmmaker. Singer is known for doing ensemble films. If you look at one of his very best, and that is, of course, The Usual Suspects, that is a great ensemble film, a great ensemble cast. And you have a similar dynamic with the X-Men films. You're dealing with an ensemble cast. And you've got Halle Berry as Aurora Monroe, aka Storm. Like I said, you got James Marsden and Famke Janssen. You've got Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. You've got Anna Paquin. You've got Sir, and both Sirs, Sir Ian McKellen, Sir Patrick Stewart as Xavier and Eric Lyncher, aka Magneto. And as outlandish as these characters seem, Singer was able to make them feel real. Not only that, the actors and actresses that were portraying them were able to make them feel real, make them feel credible, bring a sense of legitimacy to the comic book movie genre.
And I think with the first X-Men movie, what doesn't really get talked enough about is the fact that that was also like kind of similar to how like see the first Harry Potter film, which came out a year after this. Like that is like
Mhm.
our entry point to this new world. Like we are learning the same way like Rogue is learning about and Wolverine are learning about the X-Men, about mutants. Like we're learning from their point of view about this new world that we're walking into.
Yeah, and that was the great thing about this first film. They used Rogue and they used Wolverine, and honestly, I will say this, the opening sequence with the flashback to World War II with Eric Lyncher, Magneto, and his parents going through the gates and everything, and the guard posts there at Auschwitz. That was a great sequence.
Absolutely, a very
And
powerful
yeah,
one.
yeah, and then you flash forward to a number of years in the future to what could be considered our present day with Marie, aka Rogue, um, discovering this power that she has. And what Singer did was he was introducing the three principal characters, honestly, of that first film. Because if you consider the link that's between them by the time we get to the end of the movie, they are inexorably intertwined with one another. There's the connection between Rogue and Wolverine, obviously. Um, and most definitely, Being's Magneto is the main antagonist of the film. He's linked to those two other characters because he's the one that schemes to give Rogue his power to power that device that will cause a genetic mutation in normal human beings. And as outlandish as that whole movie sounds, it's still, like I said, there's still a thread of credibility to it. It makes it believable. It makes it real.
Absolutely. And another thing, like people like, so obviously we just had No Way Home come out. We had the final battle at the Statue of Liberty. People forget like X-Men did it first.
That's right. Yeah, and honestly, I remembered that myself, and I was like, this is a nice wink and nod. This is a nice homage to the first X-Men film. And I was like, that wasn't necessarily lost on me because I had seen the first X-Men movie and that final conflict there on Liberty Island, on Ellis Island, has stuck with me all these years. So for them to do that little callback in No Way Home, I thought was very appropriate.
Especially for the younger audiences who, who are younger than us that may never have even seen these movies or only seen these movies once and kind of like push them to the side because, they're not MCU or anything.
Well, yeah, but and here's the really amazing thing. With Disney Plus now and Disney Plus own Fox, they have all those movies on Disney Plus now. And this younger audience can go back and watch these films and even watch the animated series because I believe both Spider-Man and I'm pretty sure X-Men are both on Disney Plus right now. So for not only us, the generation that grew up with Marvel before the MCU, but for those that have grown up with Marvel, the MCU being Marvel, this is a great opportunity for them to revisit all these really great introductory properties. So, and everybody give a very warm welcome to Mr. Zach Leary. Zach, good to see you, man.
What's up, guys?
Hey, Zach, how's it going? Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too.
So, well, we're just doing the talking Marvel before the MCU. So, Zach, the floor is yours. So,
it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I mean, you've got some great stuff.
I have to agree.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You've got some stuff that's kind of mediocre.
Yes.
I think the biggest achievement they had cinematically is obviously the X-Men franchise. I mean, it kind of proved to the corporate money that you could actually do something that would be commercial. So I think without that stepping stone, we might not be where we are today. And I'm sure you guys probably know this, but I'm not sure if your audience does. Kevin Feige got to essentially be in training during this period and was working with the filmmakers and the people involved. So it was kind of a trial run for Marvel.
Yeah, I remember he talked about his like experience working as like a smaller producer on the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies.
Yep. And I think with a couple others too.
Yeah, as I understand it, he was over at Marvel Studios before it was really Marvel Studios, and he was working on a lot of the different productions that they did before the establishment of the MCU. And, the great thing about Feige is this. Not only is he a really good producer, he is also a fan. And, that's where you have that happy marriage of a fan being in a position of power to really bring stories and characters that he would want to see, and he knows that his fellow fans would want to see as well, to life. And, you know, you mentioned X-Men. I wholeheartedly agree with you. The whole ensemble concept in comic book movies was really established in X-Men. And I would say equally so, the solo hero film was honestly really established with the Sam Raimi films.
Yep.
Granted, X-Men or Spider-Man 3 has its issues, and they are major. We weren't going to sugarcoat it here.
Well, they proved that at least 2 of their properties could be big commercial hits, right?
Oh, yeah.
With both of those. So, when you have success like that, it gets some of these, the people who have the money thinking, well, what else could we do?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the great thing about the in the years before the MCU, because they did a lot of experimentation, and some of it was actually very well done, and other times it was cringy and horrid beyond all belief. I mean, we've mentioned 2 of the really big, outstanding franchises that were attached to Marvel, and that's of course X-Men and Spider-Man.
Yep.
But for every Spider-Man 2 and X-Men 2, X2, X-Men United, you have a Fantastic Four, or even though we would regard it as campy and a cult classic, it is still bad, Howard the Duck.
I kind of like Howard the Duck. Are you guys shocked to hear that? I do like it.
No, because you have a very because here's the thing, exactly. And this is something I've learned about you, and it's something I'm happy that I'm not surprised by. You have a very unconventional taste when it comes to movies and to TV shows, and that's not a bad thing by any stretch. So
there's a fondness I have for Howard the Duck.
There is, and I will say it too. I by no means hate it. It's not a movie that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, bud. Really. Please.
Well, I was just going to say, I kind of wish they had done something more in the line with the comics, with him smoking cigars and kind of being more of a nefarious type character.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they've done that with the cameo appearances that he's made in the MCU, with in particular the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and of course his appearance in the episode of What If that deals with Star-Lord. So I get what you're saying, and I
didn't see that. What If? I haven't seen that.
Okay. It's I think the second or third episode, it deals with T'Challa being Star-Lord instead of Peter Quill. And when they go to nowhere, Howard the Duck makes an appearance, and T'Challa uses him as a guide to get to where he's wanting to go. And Howard kind of double crosses him. So, or kind of leaves him stranded, I should say. I think if I remember, it's been a little bit. So
I saw Ultron cut Thanos in half and opted out of the show.
Yeah, I remember that one very vividly. That's the one with when Ultron discovers the Watcher, and you have that big epic fight between the Watcher and Cosmic Ultron, and whew, that's a hell of a thing.
Well, have you guys gone into Fantastic Four yet?
We haven't, but we can. So, but before you do, I just want to send a shout to the chat, Mr. Marcus Cruz, our resident Marvel fanboy, as big as I am. Marcus, it's good to see you. And he says, Ambassador, have you ever heard about the rumor that Jim Halpert is Reed Richards in Doctor Strange 2, and that Doctor Strange will be writing mutants into the MCU history? We'll have to wait and see, Marcus. Marcus, I'm just going to tell you this, and you should know this by now. I don't go into a lot of speculation. I don't do rumors. So anything you bring here is going to be news to me. But I regard any rumor or any speculation as simply that. I don't give it a whole lot of credence.
And potentially experience ruining, too. That's what a rumor is.
Yeah, that's true too. So I don't give a whole lot of credence to anything like that. But Zach, please, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I'll start us out
Fantastic.
here best I can.
No,
I
you're fine. Go ahead.
I think the Fantastic Four movies had a great cast. I think they had a great cast. I think all four heroes were really kind of perfect casting. I mean, look, the one guy would go on to, what's his name? Chris Evans would go on to play Captain
Mhm.
America.
Yes.
So he clearly can carry that kind of a part. Reed Richards, I thought, was great. Everybody, I thought, was really good. Michael Chiklis is a great
Yes.
actor too. So
Yes, he is.
really
I
good
remember.
cast, poor execution, I think.
I can. George, your thoughts. I want to let you go.
Um, I think I mentioned this on here before, but for the audience who doesn't know, like Michael Chiklis, that's the guy that played the thing, right?
Yes.
He looks like my Uncle Larry, like without a doubt, like a carbon copy. I will say, like Zach's right. I think they had a great cast, and honestly, I think like they had a good chemistry, in my opinion. Like they did feel like a Fantastic Four to me. Like at least the
Yeah.
problem is just that things weren't executed well. The story wasn't that good. It was like you have great casting, and the performances I thought were good and enjoyable. Not great, but good. I thought you had good chemistry. I don't think Doctor Doom was that bad, but I just felt like things just they were just off. And I think it's not as bad as people make it seem like, but it's not a good movie. It feels like wasted potential.
And at the time I watched the Fantastic Four films, I thought they were okay. I didn't walk out like really super stoked or anything after seeing them, but I didn't walk out unhappy. But yeah, I have to agree with both of you. The castings were solid for both those films. But the problem was the stories were very lackluster. I will say this, Julian McMahon as Victor Von Doom, as Doctor Doom, is one of my all-time favorite Marvel villains. He was solid. He was good. I liked him. I felt them giving him some sort of power ability from that cosmic storm was not a bad move per se. But yeah, it just the execution of the story itself. I mean, granted, the first movie is essentially an origin story for how the Fantastic Four gets their powers, the long and short of it, in their first major battle with Doctor Doom. But aside from that, the movie was just kind of a bore, to be honest with you. And when I think of the Fantastic Four, I don't think of them sitting around moping, trying to figure out how to cure themselves. They embraced the fact that they had these powers and abilities, and it seemed boring. Now with the second movie, Rise of Silver Surfer, I mean, obviously you've got the returning cast coming back, including Julian McMahon as Doom. And again, I thought they were all solid. I thought them making the Silver Surfer a purely CGI character was a good move, considering the nature of that character, and having Lawrence Fishburne voice the Silver Surfer was a good move.
Yep. Yep.
But for me, the big thing that really killed that movie, and I mean absolutely ruined that movie for me, was the concept for Galactus. That was one of the first times I ever walked out of a movie like legitimately pissed off. And I was like, you took one of the greatest villains or one of the greatest characters in Marvel and you made him a cloud.
That was just like
You made him a freaking cloud. I mean, there was a vein popping out of my forehead, and that never happens. Of course, I'm using a little bit of hyperbole here, but
Yep.
still, I've said this numerous times. It didn't have to be a guy in a giant sized guy in a purple suit of armor. You could have redesigned Galactus. You could have done any number of things with that character, but you made him a cloud. Galactus is not a freaking cloud.
Yeah, that's it's those fateful words, I think, that were almost definitely spoken in the writers' room. We're going to have to interpret this. That's what happened there. They're like, well, how are we going to do that? We're going to have to do our own thing with it. We're going to have to interpret it.
And it breaks my heart and it breaks my brain. And I know there has been kerfuffle about the Eternals, but I will say this: if they can do the Celestials and Eternals, then they damn well now can do Galactus properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I like it, the MCU, I think, can definitely do Galactus properly down the road. I don't know when,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it's definitely got to happen at some point. Like if it's
will.
like if it's like the conclusion of the MCU, so be it. But get it done.
Yeah. So, and want to give a very warm welcome to another alum of the Ambassadorial Wing, and he's kind of the inspiration for this stream tonight. Give a warm welcome to Ferris of Ferris Geeks World. Ferris, good evening, sir. Good to see you.
Hey, Ambassador. Hey, George. Hey, Zach. How you guys doing? And
Hey,
Happy
Ferris.
New Year. I kind of late.
Happy
Same
New Year
here.
to you
Happy
as
New
well,
Year,
bud.
Ferris.
Yep, doing good, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good too. Kind of like multitasking right now. So I kind of like have to join the stream while multitasking because I'm kind of like with my daughter. So sorry if there's any like background noises going on here.
Oh, don't worry about that. That's fine. Hey, no worries. So, anyways, Ferris, your thoughts? Marvel before the MCU. Where would you like to take the discussion? Floor is yours.
Well, I like to take back like after I watched the animated series like during the after like when the 90s is like over. So I guess like my first introduction has always been like the animated series when it comes to both Marvel or even DC. We have both like animated universe like during like the 90s. Like we have DC with Batman animated series and Superman, and then we have like Marvel. My favorite, of course, is X-Men and Spider-Man. Those are my two favorites. But I did get to watch like other Marvel shows like Fantastic Four, and even the Incredible Hulk animated series, Iron Man 2. I did like go back and watch the animated series, the Marvel animated series like of the 90s, like in Disney Plus. I mean, they're kind of like my favorite. I try to catch up with Iron Man because I didn't like watch all of it. I just watched some of the episodes, but I kind of like it. But so after like the movies. But after the animated series, I didn't know like the first movie was actually Blade. To be honest, though, I didn't even get to watch like the episode of Spider-Man the animated series where Blade appears. But instead, like I got to see like there's a Blade movie first before, watching an episode of Spider-Man animated series where Blade appears. So that was kind of like my first kind of like experience when it comes to the movies. I didn't get to watch Blade in theaters, and I didn't even get to watch X-Men in theaters, but I got to watch them on DVD or VHS by that time. So by the time like I got into Spider-Man, it was my first Marvel movie theater experience. But that was like the first time. Then I got to watch Hulk, and I did get to watch like the Punisher also, but I didn't even get to watch like Daredevil or even like and even the Punisher was like like R rating. I didn't get to watch that. Sorry about that. But so Marvel movies in theaters was Spider-Man, Hulk, and Fantastic Four by the time. But after those movies, I have to watch like the rest of the Marvel movies like Daredevil. I didn't like the theatrical cut. Apparently, there's a director's cut by that movie, and I think the director's cut is a much better written film than the theatrical one. So when it comes to the other movies like Hulk, I did a review of that movie on my channel. It was kind of like misguided, to be honest. But I thought the casting was all great, but it's kind of like a waste to like just utilizing their talents. But if you compare to the rest when it comes to origins, X-Men doesn't have much of an origin. It's just like it's just very much like Wolverine like joining the X-Men and then like going on a battle with Magneto. It's kind of like a very basic X-Men Brotherhood battle story. For an introduction, Spider-Man had a really good origin story for its time, but I kind of like enjoy more X-Men and Spider-Man. I think those were like my favorites. If there's anything like I like to fix like in the first X-Men movie, I would have loved to see Beast, to be honest. I think like Beast is like an important character in X-Men and I thought like the cameo in X2 was like, that's very subtle, but whatever. But I think like it would have been cool like to have like Beast to appear in the first movie, maybe have an inhuman form, and then two movies later on he'll be turning like furry blue and all that. I think that's kind of like my only issue. I mean I love the four characters of the X-Men. I mean, of course, like Cyclops has to be my favorite in there because he is just like his comic book counterpart. But when it comes to the rest of the characters, they're doing okay. I mean, Halle Berry, felt like off at most times. She could have done it better, to be honest. But I think like her youth counterpart, which is played by Alexander Shipp, well, does a much better job than her, in my opinion. But Halle Berry could have done it much more better. I mean, she's a good actress. Famke Jensen, I love her in that movie too. Professor X, played by Patrick Stewart, also awesome. And of course, Hugh Jackman, is of course good as Wolverine. Even though I have problems like, whoa, he's so tall. Like he's like taller than James Marsden. Yeah, because I mean, I guess like. By the time I heard like behind the scenes, like he wore like platform shoes in order to appear taller, but sometimes it felt kind of off, and most times. But I guess he didn't have that same type of shoe that Robert Downey Jr. always wore, like in every Marvel movie, because he's like pretty much short, not that 6 foot and all. But hey, after all this, like if I think about Marvel before the MCU, films, like it has to be the first 2 X-Men and the first 2 Spider-Man and the first 2 Blade. But their third movies kind of went downhill. Yeah, downhill from there, and it kind of destroyed a bit. But I still think like the first 2 X-Men movies, Spider-Man movies, and the first 2 Blade movies were good films. And I did love the first Punisher too with Thomas Jane. I thought he was like badass in that movie, but I was kind of sad that he didn't return for the sequel. I think it would have been cool to have him more in the sequel. And that's kind of like the first time. Okay, that's the whole story of like my first introduction to Marvel before the MCU. Like if I go to like Fantastic Four. I heard your discussion before. Julian McMahon, he's pretty good casting. Again, like because like back in my childhood, I watched him in the TV series Charm. He was good in there too, along with Alyssa Milano and the other cast. But when it comes to him, it could have been a better writing. And again, I didn't like the casting of Jessica Alba. Just there to be pretty. I think it's kind of like a curse for her to be like in movies. So she's never been in movies for a while. So she's just been in a TV series by now. Well, it's a good thing for her. But I do like Ewan Griffith as Reed Richards, Chris Evans as Johnny Storm, and Michael Chiklis as Ben Grimm. I think they really captured the character's personality. Not very much for Jessica Alba. And again, like the movie could have been better. They could have had like much adventure in space. I did like a writing like how to fix the third act for the Fantastic Four. I think like they should have taken the final battle in space, like the similar plot to Magneto when when he's about to turn the UN people into mutants. Why not like have Doctor Doom go into space and use the cosmic radiation to turn the whole world into into superpowered beings on Earth? So he's the ruler. That would have been cool to be honest. I mean, having Marvel before the MCU stuff makes me want to go and read all the comics and think like what could have been done better in the movies. So that's kind of like my thing. So like that's like before, before Iron Man, before Captain America, before Thor, before the whole MCU stuff. So that's to me, by the way. Ambassador, I probably want to ask you, what do you think about my thoughts on the X-Men with Beast in the first movie and fixing the third act for Fantastic Four? I'd like to hear your comment about that. And sorry to go all fanfic here.
Honestly, I don't think we really needed Beast in the first film because we had so many characters as it was. I thought the third act of the first X-Men movie was good as is. They kept it very small. They kept the story insular, and they kept it focused on where it needed to be, and that was on the X-Men specifically. To try and bring a bunch of other characters in would have just made the story, honestly. So, okay. Hey, Zach, you have a good night, bud, and appreciate you popping by. So,
Yep.
be
See you later.
careful.
Zach.
See you later, bud.
See you, Zach.
So, but honestly, I just know as far as how they did, I'm perfectly happy with the story that we got in the first X-Men film, and no, I don't see the necessity to bring in other characters like Doctor Doom or anything and do any type of crossover work, because here's the thing: at the time, it wasn't earned. They hadn't done any other films at the time that coincided with one another. This isn't the MCU and everything. This was just small insular pocket stories that could have potentially been connected, but never really were. So I was
Ambassador, I'm sorry to disturb. I was kind of asking, like, what do you think if the third act of the Fantastic Four movie having a similar third act to the X-Men, where Magneto in the first movie, plan was to turn everyone into mutants in Liberty Island, but in Fantastic Four, what do you think of the climax if they change the climax from having the Fantastic Four battling Doctor Doom in New York, but instead they go to space. Just imagine like Doctor Doom trying to use like the cosmic radiation to turn the Earth like into superpowered beings or something like that. That's what I'm asking.
Okay. Sorry, I must have gotten my wires crossed on what you were asking, Ferris. My apologies. Honestly, that doesn't sound like something that Doctor Doom would necessarily do, because I know the character pretty well, and he was more about keeping power for himself rather than giving power to others. And that's not in keeping with the dynamic of the character. So I mean, as flawed as the conclusion to that first film is, it was it felt organic to the dynamic of the characters as I understand them and as I knew them. And yes, I love the Fantastic Four team. I had read their comics for a very long time, and so just them doing something like that with Doctor Doom just would not have felt in keeping with what the character is naturally about. He's about amassing power for himself, about taking over the world. And if he's imbuing the general populace with powers, that's going to make them much more difficult to control and to rule. So, no, as like I said, as imperfect as that conclusion is, I think it's better than some alternative, honestly. I mean, I'd have to really sit down and think about what might be a better conclusion for that film and everything, but as it is, it's okay. So, I do want to address the chat because Beast has been brought up in terms of X-Men, and we did get X-Men. Beast did not appear in X2, but he did appear in X3. And of course, we don't necessarily talk about X3.
Well, he had a cameo. Sorry, Ambassador. He did have a cameo, like when one of the security guards of Magneto went into a bar. So he appeared on TV, and apparently, when I checked out, that wasn't Kelsey Grammer, to be honest. That was a guy from the Andromeda series. I think his name was Steve Basic. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Okay.
So that was the cameo. So Kelsey Grammer,
Okay.
has a main role in X3.
Okay. Honestly, I will say this. I'm glad that they did do either whatever you want to consider it, a soft or hard reboot for X-Men with First Class. And I have to admit, at least the first 3 films, I know some people don't care for X-Men Apocalypse. Myself, I love X-Men Apocalypse because I love the character, that particular villain. Again, he's one of my all-time favorite Marvel villains. I enjoyed that film immensely. And but as far as First Class and Days of Future Past go, the casting for First Class was absolutely stellar. I mean, you had Jennifer Lawrence, you had James McAvoy. I'm gonna look this up because this was honestly a very strong cast for First Class. I mean, of course, you had Kevin Bacon. Cast for X-Men First Class. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Okay, you had James McAvoy. You had, of course, Michael Fassbender as Eric Lyncher, Magneto. You had Jennifer Lawrence. You had Nicholas Hoult as Beast. You had Kevin Bacon. You had January Jones as Emma Frost. You had Rose Byrne as Moira Taggart. You had Zoe Kravitz, who's gonna be coming up very soon in another superhero film, as Angel. You got Caleb Landry Jones as Banshee. You've got Oliver Platt. Let's see. Who else is in this? So yeah, but honestly, I loved First Class and everything. I remember going to see it back in 2011, and I was like, now I know this was in 2011. By this point, the MCU was going at that time, but these films weren't connected to the MCU specifically. They were separate from it. And, honestly, First Class is by far, I think, one of my favorite X-Men films in the entire franchise because it tells a very unconventional story. I mean, we get an origin story for Eric Lyncher that kind of delves a little bit deeper into what happens to him after he gets out of Auschwitz. We even get a bit of an origin story for Professor Xavier. We see him not so much as the studious bookworm that he's portrayed in a lot of the other films. He's kind of a ladies' man. Yeah, Ace, I will agree with you. First Class deserves more love. It really, really does, because after what we got with X-Men: The Last Stand, the series deserved a reboot, and I think First Class was definitely a step in the right direction. So, George, Ferris, your thoughts on that, or on anything really? So.
I just gotta be honest though, when after going from Last Stand, I kind of it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. But I did, however, research like what would Bryan Singer's X-Men 3 would have been, and I think I already addressed this on your channel. I think it's a better written story, because it was supposed to adapt the Phoenix Saga, and it was supposed to focus on the resurrection of Jean Grey, and we would have had like the Hellfire Club as the main villain. But again, like when it comes to studios, they like Fox, they didn't even like sign the director for the third movie somehow, because he was like under like a 3-picture deal at that time. He wanted to make X3 like after he did Superman Returns back in 2006, but he wanted to do X3 like after 2000, after like Superman Returns, but unfortunately they Fox terminated his deal. And like this was supposed to be like Bryan Singer's first trilogy, but instead they just screwed it up again. And I think like the one thing that I didn't even mention like during your X-Men stream, Ambassador, is that in X3 we were supposed to get a better role for Cyclops. And as much as I love that character growing up, and Cyclops was supposed to have a main role in that movie. He was like once he knows that Jean is alive and and then she's resurrected, he immediately hear me out on this. He immediately builds the Danger Room and he trains the new recruits of X-Men. Like Iceman was going to be back, Rogue was going to be back, Nightcrawler was going to be back. We would have got, of course we got Colossus, and we would have gotten Gambit, who was, by the way, going to be played by Keanu Reeves. And of course, like that story would have led them into battle, into like 3-group battle. X-Men versus Brotherhood versus Hellfire Club. They're trying to say, X-Men wanted to save Jean Grey, the Brotherhood wanted to use Jean Grey, and the Hellfire Club wanted to take over the world using Jean Grey. So that would have been like a third, a better third movie. But again, it's kind of like again, it's a waste opportunity to not use that kind of story. It would have been like the best X-Men movie we would have gotten back then. But then of course we got but then of course Fox decided, no, we're gonna get another writer and another director, like screw continuity, and okay, X-Men: The Last Stand destroys X-Men continuity. X-Men Origins Wolverine also destroys continuity. So that's why the reboot prequel came out. That's how it does. And do you and I, after watching Last Stand, to be honest, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I go back and watch like one of the X-Men animated series episodes. Like they did it really better, of course. And then after that, like I didn't know that there was another X-Men series. Yeah, there was another X-Men series that I never get to watch, like in the early 2000s. And I'm talking about X-Men Evolution. And I thought that show, did a pretty good job like establishing the X-Men in their youth at that time, because like going back reading the X-Men comics and even reading like the first issue by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they did start out as teens, and I think X-Men X-Men Evolution really did this justice. And I thought like they did Apocalypse in that finale really good, and it makes me wanted to like, what, maybe I should do something better. Like what if what if the X-Men is really a big franchise, kind of like Star Wars? Because I see the potential in X-Men like as a big franchise like Star Wars, because like the first trilogy kind of reminds me like it's like the middle trilogy, and you could have like a third trilogy and a prequel, a sequel trilogy and a prequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy, you got the X-Men form with Magneto, and then they kind of split up. And then the second like in the second of the prequel trilogy, they could have had formed the first class X-Men, which includes like Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, maybe Storm and Angel in it. Because to be honest, I didn't really like Angel in Last Stand. He was so pointless. Exactly pointless. And of course, you can continue with more members going forward with the third movie in the prequel trilogy. And the sequel trilogy would have been cool, like if they have like some kind of mutant cure storyline similar to what The Last Stand did. But The Last Stand kind of like took the Phoenix Saga and the Cure storyline, which was relatively new at the time. And by the way, that story in the comics was written by none other than Joss Whedon. They mixed up that story, and like you said, it was piss poor. Like how there is no way you combine like both X-Men stories into one, except if you maybe combine like, I don't know, Days of Future Past and maybe like the Apocalypse story. They did it that well with the animated series going back, and I think that would have been cool to like do that in the movies. So so I did make like a fanfic, like what would be like if the X-Men, trilogy, or like if they, had it like big like Star Wars. So we have the middle trilogy, which is X-Men 1, of course, X2 and X3 both by Bryan Singer. I think it would have been cool, like if they have like the prequel trilogy, maybe some by Bryan Singer and maybe some by Matthew Vaughn. And then like the sequel trilogy, I would have loved to like maybe go like, maybe mutant cure, if it's, I don't know, from Angel's perspective, because I think there was a moment in the comics that Angel wanted to be cured or something, but yeah, but he just turned into it turned him into a horseman. But after that, like he immediately, yeah, but after that, like there was a moment in the animated series, like he did get his wings caught, like chopped off or something. But I would have loved, like, if they have an X-Men mutant cure storyline with Angel as the main character, and see him like as one of the original, students of Xavier, or something like that. And I think it would have been cool to like have the Apocalypse storyline as the final chapter of the entire X-Men franchise. That's to me like my fanfic, and I would have loved to like see the original cast like wore the traditional X-Men color coded uniform instead of the traditional all black uniform, which is like pretty bland, to be honest. They could have done blue and yellow.
Here's Ferris. Here's the thing: they were wanting to go for a different aesthetic. They wanted this to be taken more seriously, and honestly, I'm glad that they went with those black uniforms rather than going with something that was more comic accurate, because it will have looked too campy and too cheesy. And before you carry on, I do want to send a shout out to the chat, Ty of Pop Culture Corner. Ty, good to see you, man. Appreciate you popping by. So, and yeah, I do want to bring up a couple of your comments here, real quick. Pre-MCU, it was a working progress focused on X-Men and Spider-Man. Yeah, they very much did. They did bring in some other interesting movies in there. I mean, obviously with Thomas Jane's Punisher, and another one that I think gets overlooked quite a bit is, of course, Ben Affleck as Daredevil. I thoroughly enjoyed Daredevil. And we can probably get into a little bit of a discussion on that and everything here in a little bit. But I do.
Did you watch the director's cut?
I never had the opportunity to, but I'm definitely going to see if I can find a copy of it, because I have heard a lot of good things about it, so I definitely want to check it out and everything. So, but also Ace brings up two good things about Wolverine Origins. The actor, yeah, Liev Schreiber, who played Victor Creed, was the best depiction of the character in the video game adaptation. Ace, yeah, most definitely, I have to agree with you. And also shout out to the chat, Daniel Martin. Daniel, it's good to see you, bud.
Daniel.
We're doing good here, man. So,
What's up, Daniel?
Yeah. Ty, yeah, and Blade, yes, we'll definitely be getting into the Blade films here in a little bit. So, but George, your thoughts on anything that Ferris brought up here in the last few minutes? I'll give you a chance to get your thoughts out there.
I mean, like, as far as like X-Men goes, like I do agree. Like Last Stand, like obviously like had its problems when it came to like changing the directors and stuff, and then Origins Wolverine, it was a huge misfire in my opinion. I'm a big fan of Daredevil and Deadpool, and the way they treated Deadpool in Origins Wolverine will always, I can never forgive that film for it.
Yeah, because it took, I think, a fan favorite character, and that being, of course, Deadpool, and completely and utterly bastardized him. Really screwed the pooch on him.
And like the CGI claws, it's like I know that was like 2009, which feels long ago, but like for goodness sakes, in 2009, like okay, the Transformer movies may not have been all that great, but they had impressive CGI at the time.
Yes.
So you can't tell me you can't make decent CGI claws.
Yeah, I mean, the claws that they had for the X-Men movies, they were good. They were actually very good, and of course, they had practical claws as well that Hugh Jackman used, and he had to learn to work with. And honestly, I was good with that. There are parts of Origins Wolverine that I did enjoy. I would have, honestly, I would have liked it if they had taken the entire opening credit sequence, and that had been like the first half hour.
That should have been the movie.
Yes, Wolverine and the various wars. That would have been so cool to see.
Oh man, that would have been so much better. Yeah. And yeah, Marcus, my back is doing much better. It's been a work in progress. I've been to the doctor and everything, and I am doing better. But Marcus, thank you, bud. I really do appreciate that. So, and I will bring up Ace's comment here and everything. Hot take: Ang Lee's Hulk was more interesting than the MCU Hulk movie. Lee's was more experimental to make it like a comic, and the story took a lot from Peter David's run on Hulk. You know,
I like Peter David's though.
Yeah. Here's the thing, Ace. I didn't hate. Here's the thing. I don't necessarily. There are no films I like legitimately hate, except for maybe one or two, and well, they're focused around Star Wars. I won't say more than that. Y'all know where I would go. When I walked out of Ang Lee's Hulk, I was like, that was good. It was okay, but it could have been better. And it wasn't. I walked out kind of like, that was different. It wasn't what I expected, but it wasn't necessarily bad, because here's the thing. I thought the casting, Eric Bana is a very solid actor. He is a very, very good actor. And honestly, his performance as Bruce Banner, I thought was pretty good. The only thing I had an issue with was Nick Nolte. Now, don't get me wrong. Nick Nolte as an actor, he's a good actor. He's done some good stuff in his career. But him as the villain for this film just felt off somehow. And honestly, I didn't care for it. So, and I'll bring up Daniel's comment here. Deadpool looked like Baraka from Mortal Kombat.
Can I just say something about Nick Nolte?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I was about to say that too. So Nick Nolte, honestly, I mean, if you look at the comics, like Bruce Banner's father is pretty much, abusive. But when it comes to the adaptation, they try to like make him like a character, but it didn't really, it didn't really do well so much. I mean, like honestly, like with all like setting up the Hulk fighting against somebody, like honestly, like they could have done like David Banner much more better, to be honest. And I hated the fact that they give like the villain, like the like two superpowers, like Absorbing Man, and there's this character named Zax or something that's from the comics, is like a electricity kind of villain or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they give like two superpowers, and they just make like Nick Nolte's character of David Banner like really less interesting. And honestly, like there was a Marvel there was a story, there was another Marvel Comics event called Chaos War, and they bring back like Bruce Banner's father, whose name is actually called Brian Banner, that I didn't know. It turns him into like a huge like hulking monster, and that was like much better. And I felt like Marvel Comics was like trying to make up the sins that Ang Lee made in the 2003 film, to be honest. And again, I think like they could have made the father of the father, the main villain, pretty well. But again, like there was like no single motivation in this movie. It's just like everywhere on the place. That's what I felt. And so yeah, Ambassador, what do you think?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not terribly familiar with the Hulk's rogues gallery, except for maybe the leader and Abomination. So them combining the powers of two different villains and giving them to one character seemed a bit much, whereas one would have been more than enough. So, like I said, with the Ang Lee Hulk movie, I didn't dislike it, but when I left, I was like, yeah, I'm probably not gonna rewatch this again. For me, Ang Lee's Hulk is not one that has a whole lot of rewatchability. Whereas
it's totally forgettable.
It honestly kind of is. But here's the interesting thing: you get something like the Hulk that was trying to be dark and gritty, and I can't remember who brought it up. Let me scroll up here a little bit. It was Pop Culture Corner. With Blade, you had a movie or a series of movies that were very dark, very gritty, very violent. And honestly, I think now I will say this: I liked all three Blade movies. I really did. I liked the story that it told across all three films. And here's the thing: Blade is not a character I was terribly familiar with. I knew he fought vampires, and that was about the long and short of it. So going into that first Blade film, and me and my mother Ambassador went to see it back in the day, and everything, because she loves action movies. She grew up watching action movies as a kid, as a teenager. So we would often go see action films. My mother Ambassador was not the type to go see like touchy-feely chick flicks or rom-coms or anything like that. She likes stuff that had action to it. And to her, it didn't matter that it was a Marvel movie. It was just a good entertaining movie. And when we walked out, we had enjoyed ourselves. And that was the basic long and short of it. I mean, Wesley Snipes as Blade, he fits the bill. He kicks ass. He's got the martial arts aspect down. And he looks very menacing and very tough in the costuming that he did, or that they did for him. The black leather trench coat, the black leathers and everything, the sword that he has mounted on his back, and all the other gadgets that he carries and everything. I mean, that opening fight sequence where he goes into that entire den of vampires and rescues that one guy, and he just absolutely eviscerates the whole bloody lot of them. Just dusts the whole pack of them. And I know it's campy and cheesy, but when he pins that one vampire to the wall and he does that, yes, I know it's campy and cheesy, but it worked. I got a chuckle. But the rest of the film, is solid across the board. It's very dark. It's very grim at times. I mean, Chris Christopherson as Whistler, his death scene, well, supposed death scene, because for those of us who know, minor spoilers, these movies have been out since the late 90s, early 2000s. Whistler survives into the third movie, but then he eventually dies. So, but the death scene at the time, it worked. There was weight to it. And this was a character that you could root for. I mean, yes, he kills, but he kills bad people. And yes, Ace, thank you, because I was actually going to bring that up myself. Has one of the greatest burns in the history of cinema. Some mother effers are always trying to ice skate uphill. Yeah, those are definitely, that is by far one of my all-time favorite burns, period. So
That's like my favorite line in that movie.
I have to say, and it's maybe not as memorable, but it's still good. Chris Whistler comes in when they've got Blade kind of cornered there in the vampire archive. I catch you sons of bitches at a bad time, and then he sets off all those explosives and busts the Blade out. It's absolutely positively glorious. So
I gotta be honest, like Blade came
Yeah.
first, but like
mhm.
I saw Spider-Man first, then X-Men. Blade was like the last one like of those three like big franchises that I got to see.
Same here.
I feel like, is it me or does like, because it came out a year before The Matrix, does it feel like The Matrix took a little bit of inspiration from Blade?
Well, here's the thing too.
I thought the Matrix
Blade
took a lot of
films-
I thought the Matrix took a lot of inspiration from Dark City. They're kind of like similar.
They did. I would say maybe in the costuming aesthetic for sure, George. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. So, and Galactic Comic Nerd. I believe this is my first time seeing my chat. So, welcome. Thank you for popping in this evening. And let's see, 2005 Man Thing. That's one I'm not terribly familiar with. Have you, either one of you, heard of it?
I saw it on TV. Maybe George could. Have you watched it? Because I didn't watch it really.
Whoa,
I'm
what was it,
familiar with
sorry?
the character. I'm familiar with the character, but I don't think. Let me see if I can. Let me do some digging here. Hang on.
Ferris, what was the question? Sorry, I was
2005.
like drifting off.
Man.
Yeah. I mean, I saw like Man Thing on TV, but I didn't watch all of it. But
Oh, no,
I mean, did you see it?
I don't think I've ever seen it before.
Yeah, neither do I. I think it's 2005. It came out at the same year as Fantastic Four.
Yeah, here's the IMDb for it. If I can get it to come up, give me a minute. Let's see. Okay. Agents of an oil tycoon vanish after exploring a swamp marked for drilling. The local sheriff investigates and faces a seminal legend come to life, Man Thing. Let's see. Hang on here. A shambling swamp monsters whose touch burns those who feel fear. Let's see. It stars Jack Thompson, Matthew Lenevy, and Steve Bastoni. Never heard of any of these people. I'm not gonna lie. Now, it's the design for the character is familiar and everything. I do recognize the design for Man Thing, but I've never even heard of this film. So, man, that's a deep dive. So, Galactic Comic Nerd, is that the sci-fi movie? Daniel, it might have been. They might have shown it on Sci-Fi at some point. So, let's see. I'll bring up Daniel Martin's comment here real quick. Blade definitely still holds up so much so it's going to be difficult to see Mahershala Ali in the role, but I'm open to it. Yeah, Daniel, same here. You know, I'm glad that they're bringing these smaller characters into the MCU and giving them new life, giving them another chance to be introduced to the general public and to the Marvel fan base alike. You know, Wesley Snipes will always be the benchmark because I think his portrayal of Blade had a lot of layers to it, and I thought honestly the fight choreography, the stunt choreography, the prosthetic makeup, all that stuff was exceedingly well done, really. And you know, but I'll be interested to see what Mahershala Ali does with the character down the road, and what role he'll play in the broader MCU. So there is one other character I did want to discuss for a little bit and everything, and that was, of course, I mean, I mentioned it and everything, but I wanted to do a little bit more on it and everything. That is, of course, Ben Affleck as Daredevil. Now, I will say this. A lot of these characters in these movies that they did before the MCU, I was not really big on. But as far as the movies go, I was definitely willing to give them a chance. And I have to admit, and I definitely want to check out the director's cut of the movie, but just the theatrical cut of Daredevil, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It had I think a really solid cast. I mean, of course, you have one of the grand poobahs of geekdom, Jon Favreau, as
Foggy Nelson.
Matt Murdock, Foggy Nelson as his partner, in his law practice. And you've got obviously Ben Affleck, you've got Jennifer Garner, you've got Michael Clark Duncan as the Kingpin, you've got Colin Farrell as Bullseye, and I have to say it, Colin Farrell as Bullseye, he's not meant to be necessarily, but he is hysterical in that role at some points in that film. And I think I have to say, one of my all-time favorite scenes is when he's on the airplane going from Ireland to, I think it's New York, yeah, and everything. And that one old lady just keeps talking and talking and talking and talking. And he uses a peanut to shut her up. And I'm saying that's to say not so much that he killed her, but he at least made her shut up. Even though he most likely did kill her. So, and I'll bring up Ace's comment here real quick. Not sure if it was Affleck that was my intro to D&D or the episode of Spider-Man animated series. For me, Ace, it was this movie. It was the Ben Affleck as Daredevil movie for sure. That was my era. I knew of the character, but I wasn't terribly familiar with it. And I think the way they set the whole thing up, and you had, I can't remember the name of the actor who played the father, but he did such a great job as Matt Murdock's dad. Oh, for heaven's sakes, what is the actor's name?
Keith, I forgot what was his name. Keith something. I kind of forgot. I remember his name is Keith, but I forgot his last name.
You know what? I'll just look it up. It's just easier that way. Actor who played played there. Devils. I can remember how to spell. You guys remember what year the Daredevil film came out?
It was 2000. It was a Valentine's Day. I remember it came out because I saw the date.
Did you say 2006?
Three.
2003.
That's like a year after Spider-Man.
Okay, all right. David Keith. Yeah, played Jack Murdock. So, the reason I remember that actor is he actually played the father in Firestarter, which was one of Drew Barrymore's early film roles and everything after E.T. I know neither one of you have probably even heard of the film, but it's a really good adaptation of one of Stephen King's novels and everything, and he plays the dad in that film too. So let's see. I'll bring up Ace's comment here real quick. Seeing the hero get stabbed in the shoulder by his girlfriend, then having her murdered in front of him was a whole new superhero experience to 11-year-old me. I can understand that, Ace. I mean, granted, I'm a lot older than you, so I get where you're coming from. And also bring up Daniel's comment here. They covered a lot of ground in the Daredevil movie. The playground fight between Matt and Murdock and Elektra, not so much, but generally enjoyable. Yeah, Daniel, that's the thing. And it's kind of something that we've touched upon everything so far this evening. A lot of the movies and other things that they did before the MCU came out, they were hit and miss. And I imagine there were people that would say that even some of the stuff within the MCU has been hit and miss. But I think what we have now with the MCU is a universe that we are all invested in. And it's a big, broad universe that's got a lot of story arcs that are going to be going on concurrently. So regardless of where you're at in terms of what you like from Marvel, there's probably something there that's going to appeal to you. And I would definitely say pre-MCU, that was also the case. The only thing that they were kind of missing was the more cosmic and mystical aspects of the MCU. But I think maybe if they had if there had been more of an effort to try and have some continuity between all these different franchises, we could have potentially had that.
Yeah,
But
well,
go ahead,
I
George.
I don't know if like anyone like knows this, but like originally Hugh Jackman's Wolverine was supposed to have a cameo in the first Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I
I
said
did.
that, and I said that on the Spider-Man No Way Home stream before.
Yeah, I think I remember you said that. I don't know if like anyone in the chats like aware of it. So like and there were attempts to like connect this thing earlier on, and like the first Iron Man film, like a deleted post-credit scene was tied to the Raimi Spider-Man in the original X-Men as well. So like I think like there's been those plans, but because of the different studios and all that, like it was always going to be hard to do.
I'll just
Yeah.
say this though.
Mhm.
I'll just say this because because that Marvel, like in the '90s, they went bankrupt. And they sold their their character motion picture IPs to different studios. Yeah, I think that's like probably, yeah. I think like you said, George, that's probably the case. And and like most of the Marvel movies in the early 2000s, it had Avi Arad as the producer and the executive producer, and Kevin Feige, like on Spider-Man, I think he was uncredited associated producer and not executive producer. I kind of need to correct that correct that fact. And he was also the associate producer in the first X-Men movie because if I'm not mistaken, like he was working for Richard Donner and Lauren Schuler Donner, because she was also the producer at that time. So that's why, like, because of the of the studio, there were plans to like connect these films. So yeah, and remember, like, X-Men, Daredevil, and Fantastic Four were at Fox. Then Sony had Spider-Man and Ghost Rider. Lionsgate had The Punisher. And yeah, an attempt to to put it all together, it will be tough, when it comes to having three different studios at a time, because the remember, the only movies that they haven't made for different studios at a time, they were trying to get Iron Man, like, back in the day, like in the early 2000s. Tom Cruise was about to play him, and I remember also that Jamie Foxx was supposed to play Rhodey. I thought that was a good casting, to be honest.
That would have
So
been interesting.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
absolutely.
Ferris.
That would have been interesting.
yeah, I know that would have been dope. They were together in that movie. What's that called? Collateral. I think. I remember Tom Cruise had a dye his hair white or gray or something. Does
Yeah,
anybody
Yeah,
watch that movie?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
remember
saw
that.
it.
I remember that movie very well. Yeah, him and Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. That was a good film. And Ace, you have a good night, man. And thanks for popping in tonight. And appreciate you. You have a good one. And we'll catch you on the flip side. So, and I'll bring up Daniel Martin's comment here. They used the Punisher as an Easter egg in the Raimi and this Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, but I heard it was Thomas Jane's stunt double. I would have been okay with that because, like I said, I didn't have a problem with the other Punisher movie that they did in the early 2000s, but honestly, there's something about the Thomas Jane film that I think was better. It was like it was rooted in it was more rooted in reality because, let's be honest here, while it is a Marvel film, the character of the Punisher is a more realistic character. There somebody could potentially become like that. Not to mention you've got a great villain in terms of John Travolta as um oh
Howard Sane.
Howard Saint. Thank you, Ferris. Thank you. Yeah. And that whole story arc where Punisher essentially just starts to turn the entire Saint organization against itself and makes it just implode. I love a story like that. His family gets murdered because the wife, Howard Saint's wife, gets all pissy, and I'm like, oh, you're going to go down, baby, and it's not going to be pretty when you do. And it wasn't. And I know it was a bit on the nose, but when he sets those charges and then you have the overhead shot of that car lot and it's in the shape of the freaking skull, I thought that was really kick-ass. Not to mention when he straps Howard Saint by the ankle to that car and has it just roll into that that car lot that's exploding and on fire, and Mr. Howard Saint gets taken out too. I mean, honestly, I would have loved to have seen a team up. I know they've done it in the comics in the past and everything, and I don't know if they've done it currently, but I would love to see a team up between Daredevil and the Punisher. Now, granted, they would probably have to put some differences aside and so on, but still, now that we do have Matt Murdock back and we'll have him in the MCU, if they ever do introduce the Punisher into the MCU, whether it's John Bernthal or it's somebody else, I would love to see those two characters team up for a story. I think that'd be a really good Disney Plus series. And I will say this: there's content on Disney Plus that is rather violent if you really look through their catalog. So maybe they won't be able to go as hard with the violence as they would on Netflix per se, but I think they could potentially do a series with Daredevil and the Punisher. You just have to catch your Punisher. So.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about what Daniel brought up is the Punisher originally, like, his first appearance was in the Amazing Spider-Man comics. So,
yes, it was.
So, like, that's really not a surprise. Like that, like if they would have done, if there was one character that could have ever crossed over in any Spider-Man film, even if the character was in a different studio, it would be the Punisher. Because again, he made his origin in there, kind of similar to the Kingpin. Like, yeah, we associate the Kingpin a lot more with Daredevil, but he was first a Spider-Man villain.
That's right.
So, like, these characters, like, even though we know them more so in their other properties, a lot of them originated from other properties.
Well, and here's the thing that both of you have hit upon, George Ferris. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, all of these characters, all these franchises were owned by different studios. And now that Marvel Studios is more financially stable and they've been able, and with the backing of Disney as well, they've been able to make all these deals and get all of these characters back under their control. They're finally going to be able to do something that we as Marvel fans have been dreaming of for decades, especially with the beginning of the Marvel universe. I don't want to say the MCU, but the pre-MCU. With the Marvel universe before it was all connected. And they're going to be able to tell these broad, sweeping stories. Granted, they'll have to adapt them somewhat, which is fine. I don't care. But if they can still adapt them in a way that they're still faithful to their original source material, I am fine with that.
I do like to say something, though.
Go ahead, Ferris.
I am, again, like during the Spider-Man No Way Home stream, I used to think like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, is somehow like after watching like the whole Marvel movies, like from Spider-Man, X-Men, Blade, Hulk, Punisher, and the Fantastic Four, I always think like they're probably connected for some reason, because I'm pretty sure George knows about the Spider-Man animated series, like after the first Spider-Man movie. It was like in late 2002, early 2003.
The new animated series. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. By the way, Peter Parker in that series, voiced by Doogie Howser, not joking, but he even mentions the X-Men in that series, and there was even an episode where Michael Clark Duncan reprised his role as Kingpin. So I guess like probably like that animated series is probably canon with the Raimi films, I guess, because like it's set to be taking place after the first Spider-Man movie, and it focused on Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Harry Osborn in college together. So yeah, I think so technically, after watching that movie, sorry, that series, I think probably like Ben Affleck's Daredevil is probably canon with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man series. So even more so, like if they have like a Punisher stunt double by the end of Spider-Man 2, where Mary Jane runs around with her wedding dress. So I think like they're probably connected somehow for some reason, and not to mention probably Ghost Rider could be connected too, and not to because again, it was produced by Sony Pictures, Columbia Pictures, to be exact, owned by Sony. So I guess like probably like these four characters. So we already got like Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Punisher, Daredevil, and maybe the X-Men. I guess they probably connected for some reason. And also, I probably want to bring this up though. In case both of you don't know, and I'm pretty sure George knows about this. I don't know. There was an alternate ending of Blade where Wesley Snipes and the other character, I forgot what's her name. By the end of the film, they were standing on a rooftop, and there was in an alternate ending, there was a guy standing on top of on top of a building, and that's said to be Morbius. But that, yeah, again, that was an alternate ending. So yeah, that was
that.
yeah, that was deleted, and so it got changed because Morbius again is a Spider-Man character and not really much Blade, because I think like a Blade versus Morbius movie would have been awesome. But again, Morbius was supposed to be like the main villain in Blade 2, but it got changed to no Nomak, I think was the name of the villain in Blade 2.
Yeah,
Was it called
Nomak.
No? Yeah, no, yeah. So
Nomak or Novak, or it might have been Novak.
yeah,
Maybe.
so that was like they changed the main villain from Morbius to Nomak. Okay, so again, that Morbius is a Spider-Man character. So yeah, technically Spider-Man is owned by Sony by that time. So yeah, they didn't get Morbius in the Blade sequel, but I would have loved to see Blade versus Morbius back then. That would have been a good start to maybe get an introduction of Spider-Man or something. But hey, that's just me, my kind of fanfic.
No,
I can't. I can't really. I can't really blame that, because, I mean, we after like No Way Home, it's like I feel like the Marvel multiverse, like whatever you want to call it, like at this point, like with like Doctor Strange 2 like coming up, it's like I feel like there's good, like they're gonna like embrace everything that they put through, like after No Way Home, like bringing back like the Toby and Andrew like films. And like I know like we can't go off of like rumors and stuff, but like with Doctor Strange 2 like being the multiverse, it's like I wouldn't be surprised if like some of these pre MCU characters make an appearance. I'm not saying they will, but it wouldn't surprise me at this point,
Yeah.
after like what No Way Home pulled off. And this is why I love Marvel, because they embrace their past, whether it was good or not. Like No Way Home embraced like things from like their two worst Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2, and they made it better. So
Yes.
like if you like, let's just say like Doctor Strange 2 brings in, the Fantastic Four from the 2005 film, like, or like I like one rumor that recently came up was Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider. It's like I would be fine with that, because
Yeah,
they're
and
embracing their past, and it would make sense, especially because eventually we're going to see these characters in their MCU forms.
well, and here's the thing, and um, we didn't touch upon this yet, but we can, and that is, of course, Nicolas Cage as the Ghost Rider. I'll say this: I thoroughly enjoyed the first movie. Now here's the thing: I didn't even bother to go see the second one because it just didn't interest me. But the first film, I really enjoyed it. It was, yes, it's very campy, and yes, it's Nicolas Cage, and he himself tends to be very campy.
It's rated PG-13. I thought it will be like rated R.
I can see that argument, Ferris, most definitely. But at the same time, I think they wanted to appeal to a broader audience, so I was good with the PG-13 rating that we got. But of course, you've got Nicolas Cage, and of course you've got Sam freaking Elliott. And Sam Elliott in that movie, he's just glorious. He really is. So, and I will come back to that in just a second. But I do want to bring up Daniel Martin's comment here. They were trying to implement Werewolf by Night in Blade, Trinity, alternate ending, or just a random werewolf for the spinoff for Ryan Reynolds' Jessica Biel movie that they were planning. Yeah, Daniel, I do remember that and everything. I'll say this. I loved Ryan Reynolds in Blade Trinity. I liked Jessica Biel as well in that film. Of course, Ryan Reynolds has one of my all-time favorite insults ever in a movie. Again, just like with the line from the first Blade and everything, just after he kills Deacon Frost. And Ryan Reynolds' character, Hannibal King, insults Parker Posey's character, the female leader, the female vampire. And and yes, I will use the swear here. I will use it in its full context. He calls her a cock-juggling thunder cunt, and I cannot help but laugh at that insult, at that burn. And he is just absolutely proto Deadpool in this movie. I mean, it's like Ryan Reynolds was practicing for eventually going to be playing Deadpool, because some of the insults and burns that come out of Deadpool's mouth, they're absolutely glorious. They really truly are. And I liked Blade Trinity. I liked the fact that they finally brought in Dracula. I liked the actor that they got to play Dracula. I liked the design of Dracula in his pure vampire form, not just his human form. And, honestly, Blade Trinity, I know people have issues with it. There are some issues with it. I won't lie.
Ambassador.
Yeah, Ferris, what's up?
Did you know that there was a lot of drama going on during the production of Blade Trinity, like during filming? Because I heard like Wesley Snipes, didn't feel comfortable working with Ryan Reynolds, and they're kind of like maybe there have been like a feud or something between those two actors. Were you aware of that? I'm pretty sure George knows about this.
George, did you know about this? Because I didn't.
I'm not too sure. I don't think I've heard of this.
Well,
No,
there was some kind of a tension between Ryan Reynolds and Wesley Snipes, and there was a time where Wesley Snipes kind of like refused to go filming a scene or something, and yeah, I think that's like probably maybe the downfall of the Blade franchise or something. Yeah, it's because of
considering how the movie turned out, it wouldn't be a surprise if it was true, because usually it's the movies that have drama behind the scenes that turn out bad.
Yeah, and that is true too. And honestly, whenever there's a very old saying that I'm sure both of you know of, where there's smoke, there's fire. And when there's rumor of trouble on a production, more than likely there is trouble on a production. There is no two ways about it. So, and you've got very different personalities. You've got Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel, two relatively young actors, and they're starting out in their careers in a lot of ways. Jessica Biel was coming off of Seventh Heaven. She was trying to do something else outside of the box of that absolutely horrendous show. And Ryan Reynolds, he was trying to get his foot in the door. And they both have very different personalities compared to Wesley Snipes. I mean, Wesley Snipes at the time, by the time of Blade 3, he's been acting for a good number of years now. And he has a good idea of what he wants the character to be, how he wants the character's story to go, and so on. And I don't see a problem with that. So there may have been, I don't know if there's any type of long-standing feud, or if there was a feud, or whatever the case may be, but it wouldn't necessarily surprise me that there was some tension amongst those actors. I mean, but it kind of bothers me that it may have affected the production itself. So, it stinks, but it is what it is.
But yeah, like I said, like when it comes to
Mhm.
like films that have like drama, because again we talked about X-Men: The Last Stand before and some of the things going on there. Like also look at a film like Spider-Man 3 where there was all these creative differences between Avi Arad and Sam Raimi about when it came to stuff like
Mhm.
Venom, and that ultimately led to the film's downfall. Now I actually liked Spider-Man 3, but I love the first two. So like when you see like the difference in what the first two films were compared to the third one, because there was drama with that third film behind the scenes, like on screen, like behind the scenes drama can really affect a franchise. Like it can really
Yeah.
ruin a trilogy because there's either a difference in direction, there's spats going on between the stars, and there's creative differences.
Yeah, and it wouldn't even surprise me if there were issues on the Fantastic Four films as well. I mean, we all talked about the casting, and the casting was solid for those films. But the problem is, you've got very different personalities. You've got some very strong, big personalities that are working together and so on. But at the same time, they did such a good job that you really can't believe that there were issues amongst them. So, but despite and here's the thing, for those of us that exist in the online sphere, we're going to catch wind of all these different stories and everything, and all these rumors that come out about the productions on certain films or certain TV shows or streaming series or whatever the case may be, and that can potentially color our reaction to a film or a show, and that's unfortunate. But it's also it's just the nature of the beast. So I do want to bring up Daniel's comment here real quick. Yeah, I had heard Patton Oswalt talked about that Wesley Snipes wouldn't come out of his trailer or out of character. Well, and here's the thing: some actors and actresses, once they get into their character, they stay in their character. So it's not terribly unheard of, but at the same time, it can be a bit of an issue for the rest of the cast and even the crew and so on to be dealing with something like that. Because let's be honest here, the character of Blade is extremely harsh. He's very antisocial. He's very opinionated. He is quite honestly a force of nature, and he's just going to bulldoze over anybody that disagrees with him. It's just how Blade is. So for Wesley Snipes to not want to get out of character and just deal with people with the rest of the cast just as himself is going to make the production potential is going to make it somewhat difficult for everybody else that's involved. So, but I will say this for the pre MCU properties that we got. There were several misses. There were some resounding hits. There were some moderately good hits. But I think what we have in terms of the pre MCU is a lot of stories that helped people discover these characters like Spider-Man. Let's be honest here. Outside of people that read comic books on a regular basis, some people may have never heard of Blade. But since they made those movies and so on, everybody's like, yeah, Wesley Snipes absolutely kicks ass as Blade. He is my Blade, but I will give Marshall Ali a chance to see what he can do with the character. And you've got, obviously, I think one of the most well-regarded duologies in terms of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. And I think if you just want to count the first two films and just ignore the third one, honestly, Sam Raimi did something that I don't think anybody had actually could expect anyone to pull off, and that is to bring a convincing, serious yet fun and campy take to the character of Spider-Man.
Yeah, like it took like a while to get a Spider-Man movie done. Like I don't know if any of you guys ever heard this, but like the first time they tried making a Spider-Man movie, the script writers like actually didn't know it was about a superhero. They thought it was like a horror movie, like Man Spider.
Uh-huh.
Was
And
that
like,
during the 80s or something? Was that
yeah, I
during
think it
the
was like
80s?
the early 80s, and like Stan
Yep.
Lee like
Oh,
apparently
right.
freaked out, and like he wanted like a rewrite. And then like you had the stories in the 80s how like they wanted to have a film starring Tom Cruise as Peter Parker because he was younger in the 80s. The 90s it was like James Cameron and Leonardo DiCaprio. And then like
What?
ultimately,
I, yeah,
yeah,
that
like,
is true. That is true because James Cameron, wrote a Spider-Man story, and he had like Electro and Sandman as the villains, and there was a bit of change in the adaptation. Like Electro is like a like industrialist or something, and Sandman is like his henchman, and then somehow like there was a moment in the script where Peter Parker and Mary Jane had sex on top of the broken bridge. Like, bro, that is like extreme there.
and like one version
Wow.
like had Doc Ock like played by Arnold Schwarzenegger like in some of the earlier drafts.
What?
Yeah, this was
Nuh-uh.
like James Cameron. This was gonna be like pure James Cameron,
Oh, good
like
grief.
and
He
like,
was bad enough as Mr. Freeze. We didn't need him as Doc Ock.
but yeah, like
No.
ultimately Raimi got the gig, and like honestly, I think that's for the better because Sam Raimi
Yes.
is a diehard fan of Spider-Man, and I think Tobey Maguire was perfectly casted. Willem Dafoe was perfectly casted. Like everyone, I feel like was perfectly casted. Even the characters that we don't talk enough about, like Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben and Rosemary Harris as Aunt May.
But I
Yes.
do have a fun fact, though. I do have a fun fact. The only thing that
Okay.
the only thing that from James Cameron's script that made it into this first Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy is the web shooting. It was James Cameron's idea of organic web, in his script, and somehow like his script, was some of his script was used in for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. But again, like I don't think like he did get any credited or stuff. It's probably just uncredited. I guess like James Cameron is technically uncredited because of his idea for the origins something. Because he like I read his script, he came up like with the origin of the typical Spider-Man origin, like Uncle Ben gets killed, great power comes great responsibility, and of course organic webbing. That's the thing that made it into the final product. But again, he didn't get credit or something.
Well, honestly, I didn't have a big issue with the fact that it was organic webbing rather than being web shooters that Peter had built. And it didn't bother me. I mean, yeah, I know that traditionally Spider-Man builds these things called web shooters, and he has the fluid that he developed, and yada yada yada. But I think for the sake of the story and the flow of the narrative, just having it be something organic that comes out of his body that's part of the mutation that came from being bitten by that genetically engineered spider was a good move. It really was.
Yeah, I
So,
never had a problem with organic webbing. Like I know a lot of diehard Spider-Man fans had a problem, but
uh,
honestly, like I never really had a problem with it because it actually obviously plays into Spider-Man 2 when he loses his powers because at least when he
George,
loses, yeah.
George, did you know that they had a deleted scene where Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker actually create a web shooters, but that was get cut off.
Yeah,
Did you know about
I
that?
heard of that. I did hear about that.
I hadn't heard about that. So, thank you for cueing me in on that, Ferris.
But yeah, like the organic webbing obviously like makes sense when it comes to Spider-Man 2 because obviously that's the first sign of him losing his powers when he can't shoot webs because obviously like if you have like the web shooters, you don't really know you're losing your powers until you can't climb walls, which was later on in the film.
Mm-hmm. So, but honestly, what we have is a lot of great performances by some really, I think, talented and top tier actors and actresses for all these films. They just need better scripts or better direction in some instances, like with the Fantastic Four films, and with Spider-Man 3, and with X-Men: The Last Stand. That movie still breaks my heart
Well,
because. Go ahead, George.
I will say this. I feel like I read somewhere where Kevin Feige, like I don't know where this was from, but like someone said like apparently Kevin Feige it used to frustrate him that some of these directors didn't take the lore as seriously as he did.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you care about something, you love something, you are a diehard fan of something. You want the product that you're putting out to be the very best that you can. Considering Kevin Feige's position, both then and now at the time, he wants to put out the best possible product for the fans and for the company alike. And that's why I respect Kevin Feige as much as I do. I mean, he has had a great run of success over the last, let's see, '08 to 18 is 10, 19, 20, 21, 22. The last 14 years, he has had a great track record. And no one can take that away from him. Absolutely no one can take away the fact that he is, I would say, is probably one of the most successful, not the most, but one of the most successful producers in entertainment today. I mean, because if you consider literally the billions upon billions of dollars that he has made for both Marvel and for Disney, the man knew what the hell he was doing when he went over to Marvel Studios and said, I want a job. I want to work here because I love this. And now he's the head of the whole dang shooting match.
Well, look, all the money No Way Home's been making with
Oh,
like COVID
jeez.
just in general. Like it's gone on a rampage. And yeah, we talk about the money he's making for Disney. Look at the money he's been making. He's also been making for Sony with like the deal,
Yeah.
like all like $2 billion Spider-Man movies. Homecoming at the time, like before, like Far From Home and No Way Home was like the second highest grossing Spider-Man movie for a while, like behind Spider-Man 3. Like he's like been like they've been making tons of money, whether like it's been his influence on Sony Spider-Man movies or just like the MCU. Like he's been just like making money.
Well, and here's the other thing too. He knows how to cater to a fan base, but he also knows how to ignore the fan base. And I'm not saying that because he's dismissive or mean or anything, but he has his plan in mind, and he knows what story he's trying to tell, and he's just moving forward. And I think that is a great idea. And I think it's a great move on his part. And I do want to bring up Daniel's comment here 1 second. Daniel, what was Avi Arاد's role in those early Sony movies? Was kind of surprised they paid tribute to him, but not Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Well, here's the thing, Daniel. I don't know if you've seen No Way Home yet or not, but there is an Easter egg early on in the film where someone has painted or spray painted the name Ditko on the roof of the school where Peter and MJ and Ned and Flash Thompson all attend. And I was like, I see what you're doing there. And I was like, I'm good with that. So, but guys, do you know what role he had, what Avi Arad had at Sony before their involvement with Marvel Studios?
Avi was I might be wrong. But I think he was essentially like the Kevin Feige of Spider-Man movies at the time. He was the big producer. I remember like when I would watch like the Spider-Man special features on DVD for the first two films. Avi I read was like in a lot of interviews. He was essentially like I think Kevin Feige for like the early Marvel films, and like
I think he was the executive producer that time. He was executive producer, right, George?
Yeah, he was like an executive producer. Like he was very heavily into the decision making, and when like because he was also an executive producer for like the first two MCU films, Iron Man and Incredible Hulk, he disagreed with Feige on the shared universe thing, and so he stayed with Sony while Feige like stayed with Marvel Studios. And Feige and like not Feige, Avi Arad was heavily involved also in like the Amazing Spider-Man movies, in Venom, Into the Spider-Verse. So he's basically been heavily involved in Spider-Man movies, for better or worse.
He was also a producer in Blade. I think he was also executive producer for X-Men along with Stan Lee. He was also, I think he was also the producer in Ang Lee's Hulk and in Daredevil also.
Yeah,
So
he was
yeah,
a producer for the early Marvel movies, but once like the MCU started, like he just stayed with Sony essentially and Spider-Man.
Hmm.
And oddly enough, with Avia Red, like apparently, like in the '90s, his idea for Spider-Man the animated series was more focused on selling toys, not telling coherent stories, which is weird because Spider-Man the animated series had great stories, but
It
like that
did.
was yeah, but like oddly enough, like he didn't really care about that. He just wanted toy sales because that was when Marvel was going through its like bankruptcy problems or something.
Yeah. Hmm.
So like they needed
I think
money.
he
Like what better
I
way to
think he
make
was
money than sell
also
toys?
I think it was also a CEO of a toy company back then, called Toy
Yeah.
Biz, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that's how he got all the Marvel stuff back then. I think that's how it happens.
So like Avia Red's done many good, but he's also made very questionable decisions. And
Yes.
ultimately, like if it like he led to all this coming through, like and has led to the success of the Spider-Man franchise, especially. So even though a lot of people hate him, he's made questionable decisions. I can't at the same time be annoyed that Sony gave him a special tribute in the credits when he was involved in those early successes for Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man the last 20 years.
Well, and here's the other thing too, and I noticed this as well during No Way Home. During the credits, they also paid tribute to another big name. And it's also a name that I'm very familiar with because of another franchise that this guy is attached, and that is, of course, JMS, J. Michael Straczynski. He did a lot of writing for Spider-Man back in the day, but he was also the writer slash creator of one of my all-time favorite sci-fi series from the '90s, and that's, of course, Babylon 5, which, for those of you who know, I cover weekly and everything here on the channel every Friday afternoon. Me and my panel, we break down by episode every single episode of the 5 seasons of Babylon 5.
I'll
And
just have to
you've
say
got
something about
go ahead, Ferris.
um yeah, J. Michael Straczynski. I mean, I love his writing, to be honest, but I can never forgive like what the editors at Marvel at that time made him do with one Spider-Man story that kind of destroys the character of the supporting characters for Peter Parker, and that is Sin's Past, and of course the holy abomination that is One More Day with Mephisto. God, I can't forgive for what Marvel did to Spider-Man after Civil War.
And I can understand that, but still, I when I was sitting there through the credits for No Way Home, and I saw Straczynski's name up there on screen, I'm like, thank you for acknowledging everybody who had a part in playing this, including Straczynski, because you know not so much Spider-Man, but most definitely Babylon 5. I love Straczynski as a creative, and I'm very happy to hear. I was very happy to hear the news that. And yes, I'm going into this with an optimistic perspective, and you all may disagree with me, and that's fine. But I am very optimistic. And I'm very hopeful for the reboot series of Babylon 5 that is going to be going over onto the CW. But I have a feeling we'll also have a home on HBO Max, and we'll probably be getting an HBO Max budget. And considering what the budget that they had originally for that series was a shoestring, I am very hopeful and I am very optimistic for what JMS is going to bring us with this new series, with this reboot series. So, but I don't want to derail the conversation because obviously this is about Marvel tonight. But Straczynski has hands in both universes, both in Spider-Man and of course in Babylon 5. So it kind of lends the conversation to a little bit. So, and just real quick to shout out to the chat, Tim talks. Tim, it's good to see you, bud. Um, Glad you're here tonight. Hope you're having a good one. So, but guys, uh, I'm trying to think. Is there anything pre-MCU that we have not covered yet?
Has anyone ever I know they made like a failed like Fantastic Four movie in the 90s that never got released. Like, did anyone
Are you
ever
talking about
hear
the
about
Roger
that?
Corman one?
I
The
think
Roger
so.
Corman one.
Like,
Is that
whatever
what you're talking about,
happened with that?
George?
I think they were supposed to release that like in 1994 in theaters, and maybe or not just use it as a TV movie for a potential TV series. But again, it didn't get it didn't get picked up. It's just becoming
was-
unreleased or maybe just straight to video DVD whatever.
Here's the thing. I actually had the opportunity to watch it over on Poindexter Lounge. They did a 2 cents on nonsense watch along and everything over on their on Twitch, and they actually showed that particular version of Fantastic Four. And I you can find copies of it like on DVD. They're bootleg. They're decent bootleg copies and everything, but it you just have to know where to look. I think you can look if you go onto like Facebook Marketplace or something, or maybe eBay or something like that. You can find copies of it on DVD. So, but I actually had the opportunity to watch it that night with Enosh and them, and I'm like, I am almost glad this was never released in theaters, but because oh my freaking gosh, is it? Oh, it's bad.
I thought that the portrayal of Doctor Doom in that movie was pretty much accurate, and even like Rebecca Stapp, who played Sue Storm, was like pretty decent to be honest. But like story wise, or maybe like editing or something could have been much better. I wish I kind of wish like the script was for the 2005 Fantastic Four movie was kind of like the 1994 movie, but unfortunately, like it didn't work out. It didn't really work out by that time. But I thought like the direction of Doctor Doom or maybe Sue Storm was pretty much accurate in my opinion. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I never really got a chance to see the 1990s movie. I was just curious to see like has anyone like seen it, because I know there was a lot of problems with that movie as well. Does anyone know like if it's like on YouTube or anything?
I think there is one on
I think-
YouTube.
I think, yeah, Daniel Martin just mentioned he thinks it's on YouTube. Give me a minute. I'll take a look real quick. Hang on.
Oh, I guess we should also like talk about the other undeveloped Marvel film that didn't even happen. Like, for instance, like the Ang Lee's Hulk was supposed to have a sequel. Ben Affleck's Daredevil was supposed to have a sequel, and even like Fantastic Four, like the Fantastic Four was supposed to have a third movie, in my opinion. I mean, like if I'm not mistaken, all right, because I heard there was supposed to be like a third movie happening for the Fantastic Four film. What do you guys think about that?
I'm glad it never got released. Let's see.
Also, do you guys think like we could have gotten like a pre MCU like Iron Man with Tom Cruise as Tony Stark and Jamie Foxx as Rhodey, or maybe like I heard there was even like an attempt to bring like Thor and Captain America. Sam Raimi before he did Spider-Man, I think like Marvel even contacted him and say, hey, we want to make a Thor movie with you or something after he did like the Evil Dead franchise.
That won't surprise me. I mean, like Sam Raimi's doing Doctor Strange too, so like it wouldn't surprise me that he would take any other like comic book movie franchises.
So, now here's the thing. The Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie is uploaded on YouTube. A few people have it uploaded. It's a full length unreleased feature film adaptation. There's, I think, 1, 2, 3. There's like 3 uploads of it. So it does exist if you want to watch it. I've already watched it once. I think that's more than enough for me, honestly.
Oh, Ambassador, I just found out. Apparently, Fantastic Four 3, like after Rise of the Silver Surfer, it would. I just found out about this. Apparently, like the third movie was supposed to introduce Franklin Richards, and it was supposed to. I think it was supposed to be like finally like the Fantastic Four like finally becoming Fantastic Four and going to different worlds or different going to different planets. Apparently like they were supposed to be going to the negative zone and they were about to fight the villain Annihilus for the third movie. I would love to see that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would have definitely been interested to see them do that. Let's see if I can find this guy. All right, guys, go ahead. I'm looking up something real quick. So
Apparently like yeah, George, go ahead.
Like speaking of like more like canceled movies, like I'm like the one canceled movie that I always wanted to see is probably Spider-Man 4. Maybe that's because like I love the Raimi trilogy, but because like how far that movie almost went into production. But that was like another one where like Raimi and Sony were having problems.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were like several writers like they were working on, and I think like the final writer who wrote the script was actually James Vanderbilt, who eventually write the story and the screenplay for Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah, I think like that was like the final writer that Sony and Sam Raimi collaborated, but it didn't go well. I think like Sam Raimi is too frustrated to like going to this whole story development and everything.
Yeah, because he wanted like the Vulture and like Sony wanted the Lizard, and obviously you saw like the Lizard like was the villain for the Amazing Spider-Man. Because I remember like all these fan speculations were, oh, it's gonna be the Lizard that's the main villain because he's been set up because Dr. Connors has been set up and all of.
And Vulture was supposed to be played by John Malkovich, if I'm not mistaken, and we would have Anne Hathaway. Felicia Hardy was going to be played by Anne Hathaway.
So like like that was like going to be like the original plan, and then ultimately we got the reboot. So like that's another canceled one where like there's so many canceled Spider-Man movies, like whether they were going to be sequels or like new starts to franchises. Like I know I remember at one point there were rumors that David Fincher was gonna like at one point had an interest in directing a Spider-Man movie, or like Sony was interested in having David Fincher.
Yeah, I think also like David Fincher also wanted to do an adaptation of the night Gwen Stacy died, like before Sam Raimi, but I think like Sony didn't want to do that idea because they wanted to do an origin for a first movie. But again, I think I would have loved to see like how David Fincher would make a night Gwen Stacy died, as an adaptation. I think that would be interesting, and I thought like the supporting cast like. Mary Jane, played by Kirsten Dunst, was just kind of like lame in my opinion. She's basically just the typical '60s love interest plus damsel in distress. But again, Gwen Stacy in the third movie, she was kind of pointless in my opinion. I thought like they could have make her smarter, but then like she's kind of like a model or something. Wasn't that supposed to be the character?
They used Gwen Stacy to create more love drama between Peter and MJ, which I don't think was really needed.
Yeah, that is true. I think that is true. She would have been like just a typical supporting character who enjoys science together or something.
Like I'm a Raimi film, like I gush about the Raimi movies, and look, I like Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, but it's like at the same time I felt like at times they kind of didn't know what to do with her.
The animated series Mary Jane was better. Yeah, even the comics was written her better too. Even Ultimate Marvel Universe Mary Jane.
Yeah, no, like the 90s cartoon, which I feel like also like the Raimi movies took a lot of inspiration from.
But at least like Mary Jane in that series, I mean, she knows how to she knows how to defend herself. But when it comes to like in the Raimi movies, like I hated the fact that every like in three movies, like she is someone for for Peter to save, or even for Spider-Man to save. Like, oh god,
Yeah.
it kind of gets tiring. Yeah, I even hated the fact like she cheats on Harry for Spider-Man, and then after that she cheats on her fiance with Peter again. She cheats on Peter with Harry Osborn in the third movie. It's like it goes on over and over. Like, no wonder like people really hated that Mary Jane in the movies.
Yo,
Like,
there was a
the
meme
comics is
that
still
like
better.
someone like put on Twitter where like they have all the love interests of the Spider-Man movies where like MCU MJ and like Gwen Stacy are like, okay, Peter, what's the plan? And like then they have one where like they make Mary Jane seem very whiny and angsty from like the Raimi movies.
Yeah, that's kind of like a thing when it comes to adapting female characters. Like, in another example that I didn't really like when female characters adapted into movie is probably like in the first X-Men movie when they adapted Rogue, because she kind of reminds me a lot of Kitty Pryde and Jubilee. But both characters appear as a student in the Xavier Institute. But and instead of instead of those two, we got Rogue. However, Rogue was supposed to be like a tough character, but okay, I guess the fact like her powers really relate to a term called alienation or teen angst. Like during the late '90s, early 2000 stuff, like for teenagers back in the day. Ambassador, I think you probably have issues with Rogue. What do you think of about Rogue in the X-Men movies?
Actually, I liked her.
Yeah, same
I
here.
I didn't have a problem with Rogue's. I didn't have a problem with how they interpreted her abilities and everything. Um, I know some people would have been like, "Well, where's her invulnerability? Where's her ability to fly and her super strength?" Well, here's the thing: where does she get all those powers from? Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel,
Yo,
and
and that's what like
that character doesn't exist in this particular version of the X-Men universe. There is no crossovers. There is none of that stuff here. So
I think Rogue was I hated what they did with Rogue in The Last Stand. I mean, I'm pretty sure you hate that much too, right, Ambassador? Because like, God, oh, I cannot touch my boyfriend, blah 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 blah. Like, God, if only Gambit was there to cheer her up.
honestly, no, I didn't have a problem. I honestly did not have a problem with her story arc. I didn't have a problem with it because here's the thing. That's a very real issue for would be a very real issue for someone like her. She can't kiss her boyfriend. She can't be intimate with her boyfriend. She can't do any of the things that any other girl or whatever that a normal couple would be able to do. She can't hold hands with her boyfriend without wearing gloves for Pete's sake.
it's
Because
a
if she
character arc
does,
for her.
because and that's something that any young person's going to deal with if they are not able to have normal physical contact with someone that they care about, with someone that they love. And no, I didn't have a big problem with that character, with that particular dynamic for Rogue in the X-Men movies. I felt
Yeah,
honestly it made her more relatable, and it made her more it made her more empathizable.
and I think the
Also,
performance
Ambassador,
in a Blackwing gave like really helped like sell you on Rogue. Like she did a great job with that character, in my opinion.
she's an Oscar-winning actress.
Yeah, because she's a good actress. I like Anna Paquin as an actress. I think she does good work.
Has anyone ever seen the Days of Future Past road cut? I never got a chance to see it.
I saw it.
haven't, but I've heard. Go ahead.
Yeah, so she does have a really important role. I don't want to give too much away, but I guess like her role in the road cut kind of makes sense. But again, I don't know why they didn't release like the road cut in theaters instead that we got it on Blu-ray and DVD whatever. But again, she finally does have an important role, and even though like Last Stand really leaves a bad impression on everyone, her role was supposed to be like much better because like she's more confident with her powers and all, and maybe like I think there was probably like a moment where her powers are going to be involved with the flight and super strength stuff. It's mutation. You can have like not just one but two powers at the same time, right? I mean, like Kitty Pryde in Days of Future Past has two powers now. Like she can send consciousness, but before that she can just walk through solid objects and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I think I got to ask this question to you, Ambassador. Were you were you annoyed of the change of actress for Kitty Pryde in the franchise?
No. Mm-mm.
Because
Not really, because
for the first
here's the reason.
first movie had go ahead.
Well, the thing I was just going to say is the only reason I wasn't is because we only saw her in passing in like one of the previous films. So no, it wasn't a big issue for me. They wanted somebody that could actually portray the role and everything, not just say a few lines, but could actually had some acting experience, and they got what the person that was formerly known as Ellen Page to portray the role, and I thought they did a great job. So anyhow, but yeah, go ahead, Ferris.
I think like if Bryan Singer would have continued with X3, I think he probably would have the same actress from the from X2 to to play Kitty Pryde. But then again, after a change of directors, there were so many like change of cast again. But I was kind of annoyed sometimes. Like they changed one supporting character, but some didn't get changed at all or something. Oh, Ambassador, I also did some fan casting for the Fox X-Men universe. If it would have gone into a better direction, do you mind if I give some fan casting for the Fox X-Men X-Men universe if it's better, in my opinion?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Were you aware of the actor Jason Lewis from Sex and the City who played Smith?
I can't say that I had because I never watched Sex and the City.
Okay, so because okay, there's this he's this one actor in Sex and the City, and in my opinion is really close to like James Marsden or Famke Janssen's age. I think it would have been cool like to see like if Angel was a part of the original X-Men, so I would cast him. And I have I think all of you aware of the name Maggie Q. She would have made a good Psylocke back in the day, and also Wentworth Miller would have been an awesome Quicksilver in my opinion. Then beside that, I would have Scarlet Witch played. God, I forgot the actor's name. She was in Charm, but she didn't play. I forgot what's the actor's name. I did a fan cast. I did a fan cast on my laptop on my Node, but I have so many. I have so many like fan casts for for the X-Men franchise. What do you think if Charlize Theron played Emma Frost? Do you think like she would have been like exotic or something? An exotic Emma Frost?
Maybe.
Because she did start out as a villain, in the comics, but then she become an ally to the X-Men. But I never liked the whole Cyclops, like Cyclops cheating on, that story about that whole Cyclops cheating on Emma like telepathically. You guys seen that before, right?
Yeah.
I was aware of that particular storyline. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, like when it comes, in the comics, like I hated when they like destroy Cyclops' character just to, have her cheat with, with Emma Frost like telepathically, because there was one time in the comics where Cyclops got possessed by Apocalypse, but he didn't get help from Professor X or Jean Grey to help that pain away. He turns out to Emma Frost, the one woman that almost controlled Jean Grey and almost destroyed her, and get into psychic affair. Like, oh god, I mean, if they want to make, if Marvel wanted to have Cyclops go out with Emma Frost, I think like they should have like maybe killed Jean. But again, they killed Jean too much in the comics. By the way, she's kind of like becoming like the one character in South Park, Cardman. She's kind of like the Cardman in the X-Men universe, don't you think?
I don't know if I necessarily see it that way, but that's just my perspective on it. So.
Well, she gets killed off and resurrected like many times. But even like if Marvel wanted Cyclops to be with Emma, like they could have killed Jean off so that Scott have like a lot of grieving, and so he turns to Emma. It's the same thing like when Gwen Stacy died in the comics. Peter turned to Mary Jane, so that's kind of like a progression at that time. And so like having Cyclops like having Cyclops cheat and then like Jean died, that's kind of like a downfall to his characterization. That's kind of like as a Cyclops fan, I didn't like how Marvel usually treats him like in the 2000s. But the 90s Cyclops has always been like the best character. I mean, this, Ambassador. Like every X-Men comic in the 90s always did Cyclops justice because of Chris Claremont.
Oh yeah, Chris. I mean, if it wasn't for Chris Claremont in the work he did with X-Men back in the 90s, they would have not been nearly as popular as they were, I would imagine. So.
I like to give some fan casting, but since I am not on my laptop by now, and probably I'm gonna have to do this like another time, or maybe another Marvel stream. But I swear, Ambassador, I want to get your whole perspective on perfecting perfecting the X-Men universe. If it was under the hands of Fox, because I wanted the X-Men to be succeeded like a huge franchise like Star Wars or Star Trek or like the MCU by now. I would have loved to like see something really good. I know I'm going whole like fanfic by now, but again, like I'm really passionate about writing this stuff. It really makes me so interesting. I mean, it makes it so interesting sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. I do. I mean, it's a passion. I can respect that. I mean, I've spent at least a year and a half writing my own fan fiction for Star Wars, so I get it. I do. So, but guys, I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to start wrapping up for the evening. But I'm going to give both of you a chance to give your final thoughts on any points that we had this evening, or whatever the case may be, and then we will go ahead and call it a night. So, George, Ferris, whoever wants to go first, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so for me, like, if it wasn't for Bryan Singer's X-Men or, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, we would have gotten like the big franchise right now, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And even without the inspiration from the animated series, from X-Men to Spider-Man to Incredible Hulk, Fantastic Four, and Iron Man, or even maybe like Avengers, Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Hero, the cartoon of the early 2010s or the late 2000s. Well, we would have gotten like big blockbuster hits like what Marvel did by now. But it's fun to revisit all the the cool stuff like back in the early 2000s. as much as I am an X-Men and Spider-Man fan, I will, I love like rewatching, and I love like maybe like writing some fanfic, like like what if or something. It gives a chance for everybody to get inspired and to write and to create, because this is all of Stanley, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko's legacy all in one, and for all the other writers. And I'm glad to be like a child of the 90s, growing up with the animated series and the movies in the 2000s, and now, like, as an adult and as a father, and I would have really, and introduced this property to my kid, and to my future kid too. So if it wasn't for the pre MCU, I would not be here, like, reading and collecting comics, and maybe writing my my own stories, or anyone writing other stories. So that's for me.
For me, like, Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film was like the first superhero film I ever saw, even before the films that came before it, whether they were Marvel or DC. It got me into not just more Spider-Man stuff, but like into other superhero movies and eventually the comics, because I'm one of those people that saw some of the movies before reading the comics and various graphic novels. But yeah, like pre MCU Marvel, like, people like to make fun of like the bad films, but they don't really get a chance to appreciate the good films. I'm not just talking about Sam Raimi's films. I'm talking about the first two X-Men films, the first two Blade films. Like, they forget, like, these were underrated, great pieces of work.
Well, and, speaking for myself, to kind of put a bow on this whole discussion for this evening, as I said at the start of the stream, as a longtime Marvel fan, purely of just the comics, the fact that somebody had the vision and the ambition to say, "Hey, can we take these movies? We'll take these characters and put them into a cinematic format. Can we take something as big as X-Men or Spider-Man, or something as small as Blade or Daredevil or the Hulk, or even the extremely campy and very cheesy Fantastic Four, and put them on the big screen and see if the fans and the general audience will resonate with it?" And what we have gotten, granted, yes, is a mixed bag. There was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of good stuff, but there was also a lot of cringe. But I think the positive outcome from all of this is, now, because of these pioneers, because of these experimenters into the whole realm of Marvel as a cinematic universe, we've gotten 14 years, I think, of stellar content, of movies, of streaming series, of animated streaming series, and everything else across the board. And saying this as a Marvel geek in his 40s, growing up reading the comics, seeing it going from the comic to animation, and then from animation to live action, it has been a treat to see. I am thrilled with what we had in the past, and I am very hopeful and very optimistic for the future of the MCU. And honestly, as a fellow Marvel fan says in many chats that I see him in, and both of you may know, well, you may or may not who know I'm talking about, to one degree or another, Marvel is the gold standard. And that is a sentiment that I cannot say I disagree with. So, but I do want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight. I do want to thank my panelists, Mr. Zach Leary, George, Ferris, guys. Great discussion. I hope you all had as great a time as I did. And a great discussion, a great stream. And of course, for those of you that'll catch us on the replay, leave your thoughts down in the comments on anything that we brought up or anything that we might have potentially missed, because there was a lot here to discuss tonight. And I hope we did our best to give some love and show some respect to these franchises, these characters, these teams that we all are fans of. So I will be back, of course, next week with next Friday with the Council of Ones, and we'll be continuing our excuse me. We will be continuing our review of Babylon 5, Season 5. And then I am putting together my slate of content for next weekend. Just to give you all a little bit of a heads up, I am going to be kind of transitioning to a more weekend-focused streaming schedule, because I do work primarily during the week. So there won't be a whole lot during the week. There might be the occasional stream here or there. I might pop up on somebody else's channel. But the majority of what I'm going to be doing going forward is going to be on the weekends, because that's when I have time off. That's when I'm free to stay up a little bit later, talk about this stuff with you all, because I don't want to shortchange anything that I do put together. I want to give everything its due time. I want to give everybody their chance to give their thoughts as well. So, and we are nearing 475 subscribers. We are one away. So make sure that you are subscribed still. And if you come across the stream and you are not subscribed and you did enjoy the discussion, hit that subscribe button. And not just for myself, but for George and for Ferris, who both have channels. They're getting started good and everything, and they're doing their thing. And I encourage you, go support them as well, because they are both very passionate about this thing called pop culture, just as much so as I am. So, and I will be releasing some updates on social media going forward with what I've got coming up for y'all in the coming weeks and months. So, but thank you all for being here tonight. You all have a great week this week. We will see you all next weekend. And until next weekend, these are the ambassadors, signing off.